Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto has special eyes in Konoha. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by hafbuckeye and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1. Sarutobi Hiruzen was stirred from his thoughts by the 6-year-old waggling his robes. Ahaha, forgive me, Naruto, what did you say? The old man said, having the decency to look embarrassed. Geez, you always look off like that. Naruto pouted. You must excuse me, Naruto. My mind isn't what it used to be, Hiruzen confessed. It was true that he may have been only in his 60s to civilians. He was ancient compared to most shinobi, some would say he deserved it, but Hiruzen would disagree with them. Ever since the Kyuubi's attack and Minato's death, Hiruzen couldn't help but reflect on his mistakes. Admittedly, being Hokage during 2 major wars and countless other meaningless minor crises had taken a toll on the man, and his guilt mounted every day. Who are the bush shinobi? Naruto questioned, breaking Hiruzen's train of thought. The bush shinobi? Hiruzen echoed with some confusion. Yeah. The shinobi with the funny masks that hide in the bushes, Naruto elaborated, then turned back to his bowl of ramen. Ah, the Anbu guard, Hiruzen mused. He was surprised that Naruto had even caught glimpses. Possibly one of them had gotten careless. Maybe they had shown themselves to the boy in hopes of staving off his isolation. By the sage, he needed it. The boy hardly had any friends as it was. They're called Anbu, Naruto. They take important missions that other ninja cannot do, the old man returned. They often work in secret so that others can't see them. Why were they following me then? He inquired, eyes wide and blinking owlishly. Because I ordered them to protect you, the old man replied amiably. The young boy beamed like a fox and returned to gorging his ramen with gusto. Oi, Naruto. The cook to the boy, eat more slowly or you'll get sick. No intelligible reply was given, but it gave everyone at the stand a laugh, listening to him attempt to speak through his ramen. Hey Gigi? Naruto questioned. Yes, Naruto. Do you think I could be one of those Anbu? Hiruzen's mind came to a halt as he switched gears. No, he said sternly. Naruto looked surprised by his response. Why not? He pouted. Naruto, the Anbu take on missions that are not only dangerous for the shinobi who takes it on, but also is dangerous for the village. It was for the best that the notion was put out prematurely, Hiruzen thought to himself, by the sage he had fought with half the damn council to keep him out of that cursed branch. He wanted to see Naruto at least have the best youth he could under the circumstances, though even that seemed to backfire on him, as Naruto had been all but ostracized by the village, and seemed that the life of a shinobi was his only escape from notoriety. Hiruzen sighed heavily as he thought back to his decisions concerning Naruto's childhood. Perhaps Danzo was right about preparing the boy, as much as Hiruzen hated to admit it. Naruto was an asset, a trump card. Still, he shuddered to think about if the boy had been conscripted into the Anbu Corps from birth. No, it was for the best that he was shielded from it. Besides, he would be going to the academy in a year and a half's time. He was broken from his thoughts when a masked shinobi flickered into existence from his left. Okage-sama, your presence is required. Hiruzen groaned once more and moved from his seat. Well, Naruto, I hope that you have enjoyed your ramen as much as I have, he told the young Jinchuriki. Naruto gave him his trademark grin and gave him a thumbs up, thanks for the ramen Gigi. The old man smiled at the boy's exuberance. He moved down the street toward the tower, leaving young Naruto to stew in his thoughts as he requested another bowl of ramen. Those Anbu guys sounded pretty cool. Even though Gigi doesn't want me to be one, he thought glumly. He said they go on super secret missions. Maybe I can go on my own super secret mission. That'll teach him that I can totally be Anbu. With that thought in his head, he finished his ramen and paid for the food and walked down the street, ignoring the ugly stares he got from strangers. The boy trudged back to his house, speculating about his super secret mission, when a thought occurred to him. There was a fireworks shop in the Uchiha district of the village. With that, Naruto entered his apartment, trying not to pay attention to the curses that had been on his front door, and began thinking about his options to get into the shop unnoticed. 5 hours later. It had been relatively easy to get into the Uchiha district. The clan members just tended to ignore him. It was getting into that bastard shop that was the hard part. As soon as the man had seen a hair on his head, he kicked him out of the shop. Luckily for Naruto, he had found a window to the basement. Alright, this is it. He said as he squirmed into the window, just for him to fall onto his stomach as he fell through the opening. He groaned and lay on the floor, waiting for the pain to subside. As he slowly got back onto his feet, he became confused by the ordnance lying around him. Hey, I thought this was a fireworks shop, not a damn armory. He muttered to himself. One of the boxes caught his attention with the paper that it contained. The flowing ink seemed to draw him in. He picked up a sheet and dropped it quickly as he recognized what it was. Explosion tag, he whispered, wait, how did I know that? His thoughts were interrupted by the trapdoor rattling. Naruto quickly dove into the box full of seals and put the lid on top. He could hear two sets of footsteps come down the stairs. As the two reached the bottom, he could listen to bits of their conversation. Is everything ready? It is Fugaku-sama. You've done well, thank you. The pair talked for quite a bit, but they moved back up the stairs after a while, and Naruto breathed a sigh of relief. Just be sure that there was no one else. He waited a time until he clambered out of the box. It was now dark, and Naruto, getting cold feet, decided that it wasn't worth the trouble he could get into for this stunt and was on his way out. That is until he heard the screaming. It was dark. The night had an eerie quality that gave those who were still walking the streets of the Uchiha district a distinct shiver, as if the Shinigami was breathing down their necks. How true they realized such a thought to be when the screaming began. At first, no one was sure what was really happening, but as more and more people crashed to the dirt, reports came in that it was the clan head's eldest son. In light of this, Daichi Uchiha had hidden in his shop. His shop was civilian, with many fireworks and the like to supply during holidays and festivals. Yet, in the basement of his shop, many articles would be found predominantly in the ninja district. Kunai, shuriken, fuma shuriken, explosive tags, and other various weapons used by the ninja of his era were well stocked and ready to be put out for sale. But no such thing was to be done with these weapons. They were to be used for the glory of the Uchiha clan, to restore the Uchiha to their former power. To enact a coup d'etat upon the village of Konoha. Thus as the former shinobi of 40 years of age sat trembling underneath the desk that held the cash register, he heard the screams come closer and closer to his fireworks store. When the voices had reached their apex, suddenly they stopped as an audible hiss of shuriken met the air. Silence reigned throughout the street as the man sat, pissing himself, on the floor of his shop. 15 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute, now 2. The terrified man, hesitantly peeking up from his admittedly terrible hiding spot, saw that indeed no one was in nor near his shop. He closed his eyes and started to breathe slowly, an anvil lifted off his chest. That is until he opened them back up and saw two red eyes looking back at him. Narrowed as a judge who convicted the guilty. In a panic, Daichi detonated the explosive tag on the bottom of his cash register, a fail-safe for thieves. Hiding in the smoke, Daichi ran to the trapdoor that held the weapons of his clan's glorious cause when a kunai pierced his thigh. As the pain raced through his leg, he tripped down the stairs, causing him to break his nose on the hard concrete of his basement. At this, Daichi accepted his fate and turned to meet his executioner's eyes with blood dribbling down his chin. As he lifted his eyes to the 14-year-old boy, his rage mounted more and more. Traitor, the man screamed, Itachi, our clan could have been among the greatest in history, bound to no one, yet the Hokage has turned you against us. More shade than human, the boy silently walked down the stairs, his eyes forever fixed on the veteran with cold indifference. When he reached the bottom, he unsheathed his ninjato and moved like a ghost into stance. I loved our clan with all my heart, uncle, Itachi said quietly. But I love Konoha more. With that statement, the boy brought his sword through his uncle's throat, making the man fall onto his side, quietly gurgling his lifeblood onto the floor. As Itachi watched Daichi pitifully mule on the floor, he shed a single tear for his uncle and, bringing his head up, closed his eyes and sighed. Suddenly out of the corner of his eye, Itachi noticed a shock of blonde, moving exceptionally fast towards the Anbu operative with a sword that was much too large for him. Quick as a flash, Itachi made an uppercut connecting with the person's upper face. With a cry, he dropped to the ground, his hands moving to his right eye. Itachi would have followed through with a stab through the neck, relatively painless death, when he realized who he was looking at. Naruto Uzumaki, the resident Jinchuriki of Konoha, was lying at his feet, grunting and gasping in pain, while fighting the urge to cry. Itachi was familiar with the boy, for he had been on the boy's Anbu watch for about 6 months, and meant the boy no ill will. Though seeing him writhing on the floor, Itachi was at a bit of a pause. At the same time, he couldn't kill the boy. He also was privy to classified information. While he had Jinjutsu, which could wipe an average person's memory, Naruto was a Jinchuriki, meaning that the extra chakra pool in his body would disrupt his Jinjutsu on immediate contact. As Itachi pondered what he could do, he was broken out of his thoughts by the Jinchuriki, who had grabbed the sword once again and looked back up at Itachi, staring at him with a single left eye. As Itachi moved to disarm the boy once more, he heard Naruto utter a single word. Why? It was a whisper, yet it reverberated across the basement like it had been the scream of the now dead Daichi. To test myself, Itachi began to explain to Naruto, remembering the lie he had told Sasuke. I needed the best challenge to test myself against. It seems that my clan has fallen short. Silence once more reigned in the basement, and when Itachi figured Naruto was satisfied, he turned to leave as Naruto once again said a single word: bullshit. Itachi's eyes widened a fraction as he turned back to the 8-year-old boy looking at him with rage-filled eyes. Your eyes, Naruto breathed. They're just like mine. Itachi's eyes widened even more, this time, though for a different reason. While being an Anbu operative, he was conditioned to emotional training. Usually, when he entered such a state, he would only comprehend what he had done afterward. But for some inexplicable reason, Naruto's words had brought him out of his zone. His breath hitched, his eyes dilated, and he sank to his knees. He had wiped out his clan, butchered men, women, and children. He had killed his mother and father, all to stop them from killing more and burying their village in ashes. At this point in time, he was not the prodigy of the Uchiha clan, nor was he the Anbu operative who had carried out dozens of successful missions. At this point in time, he was simply Itachi Uchiha, a 14-year-old boy who had killed those closest to him for peace. Thus Itachi had the inexplicable urge to pour his heart out to the 8-year-old boy in front of him for no other reason than to get it off his chest. If he was able to at the time, Itachi would have laughed. Indeed, you are right. He sighed, closed his eyes, and, regaining his composure, stood back up and proceeded to tell Naruto what had happened to lead him to this point. So the Uchiha were gonna try and kill Hokage? Naruto asked, eye wide. Yes, Itachi replied. Then why do you have to kill everyone? Naruto said quietly. Itachi privately pondered whether he should tell him one final piece of information. To save my little brother Sasuke quietly. The massacre will happen either way, but if I do it, I'll at least be able to save one innocent. As Itachi wondered how this got to this point, he heard a fist slam into the floor. Why the hell did this need to happen in the first place? Naruto muttered under his breath, what the hell is the point of it all when stuff like this has to happen? Itachi sighed because it is better to endure suffering and survive than to face extinction, from a biological standpoint, even you can see that. Bullshit. Naruto yelled again, there has to be something worth death. You said it so yourself. You love the village more. Isn't that more than self-preservation? You put your own happiness and suffering on the altar of Konoha. Isn't that the exact opposite of what you're saying? There are things worth dying for Itachi. Despite his newfound respect for the child in front of him, Itachi snorted. You are a mere child. How can you claim to know such things? Because otherwise my parents died in vain and left me here all alone, I refuse to believe that. Every time I look at the Hokage monument, I feel that. You're right, I am just a kid, but that doesn't mean I don't feel the same pull that you do. The 14-year-old looked at the mourning orphan and saw something that very few others had seen in him. He was not a prankster, not a good-for-nothing ragamuffin, nor a demon fox, but the makings of a leader. He was old enough to remember when people still spoke of the lost clan of the Uzumaki, distinguished for their determination. While the young boy looked nothing like an Uzumaki, he believed that notion. Itachi came to a split-second decision. He was about to damn himself to the deepest, darkest pits of hell. Perhaps he could help someone that deserved it out of those pits himself. He chuckled mirthlessly while looking at Naruto's bloody and now destroyed right eye. Thank you, Naruto, Itachi said softly. What for? Naruto inquired, still clutching his right eye. For giving me strength. Itachi answered, and for that, and to help you become Hokage, I am going to give you a gift. Naruto was about to reply when the butt of Itachi's ninjato met with his forehead, knocking him out cold. The Anbu operative caught him and laid him on the ground. Indeed, I will give you the best gift I can give if I don't botch the surgery, that is, Itachi said more to himself than anything else. He bent down beside the boy and performed 5 hand signs. Boar dog bird monkey ram. Smoke appeared beside him, masking whatever he had just summoned. I pray that this works, he murmured. In front of him was a crow with mismatched eyes, one was with the eye of an ordinary crow, but the other had the eye of his best friend. Shisui Uchiha. 1 hour later. Hiruzen was a man who rarely was mad. Years of experience and mistakes due to his emotions had taught him that staying calm was the best thing to do in a dangerous situation. And in this case, Hiruzen wasn't mad. He was utterly furious. What a mess, he murmured to himself. He watched the shinobi go about their tasks, collecting evidence and bodies alike. What a damn mess. Who could have done such a thing? An operative audibly whispered. The old Hokage knew precisely who had done it. The boy had met him hours earlier and confirmed it. Hiruzen, however, did not answer Inu though. A voice from behind him did. Itachi Uchiha, the man clarified. Hiruzen could have punched Danzo. Of course, he was behind this fiasco. Itachi despised his clan. That is why he murdered Shisui and took his eyes, caused infighting among his clan, and finally committed this atrocity. But why would he? Enough talking. I want the bodies gathered and taken away. Hiruzen nearly shouted. The operatives in the area complied with the order and quickly shunted it out of sight lest they be in the way of the Hokage's ire. The old warhawk came to his left side. This settles everything, Danzo said after a pause. What does this settle, Danzo? By the sage. Do you not see the huge problem we're left with? Hiruzen retorted, whirling around to face the bandaged man, his anger quite visible. I consider it very minor, the Danzo confidently replied. The old Hokage took a second to collect himself, lest he did something that he would regret later on. Danzo, I cannot allow you to act on your own any longer, Hiruzen finally stated after taking a deep breath. As of this moment, you are relieved of your duties as second in command. But Hiruzen, I did it for the good of the leaf. Hiruzen angrily interrupted, well, the Uchiha were part of the leaf, and look where you left them, tattered, bloody, and nearly extinct. Sacrifices are necessary for the good of the whole, Danzo coldly answered. Hiruzen was close to his breaking point, so he took another second to calm himself. Your Anbu and Northeast will be dissolved, I will deal with you later, and until then, you are confined to your quarters. Danzo gave no outward sign of anger or frustration, but Hiruzen could see how his cane was shaking slightly. I understand Hokage-sama, he hollowly said and turned away, two of his shinobi flanking him. Hiruzen sighed and turned the other direction from which Danzo was and started to walk up the district's main street. First the Senju, then the Uzumaki, now this. He murmured regretfully. He knew that many Nukenin, bandits, and possibly other significant factions would take advantage of the situation. Indeed, Konoha had been severely weakened in the last few wars despite coming out on top, and this could have been the straw that broke the camel's back. Inu flickered into sight, Hokage-sama, he began, we found a survivor. Probably young Sasuke, estimated Hiruzen. Take him to the medical facilities, make sure he isn't under any genjutsu, he commanded. Inu nodded and created a shadow clone that flickered out of sight. There's something else, Hokage-sama, Inu said while walking up to the aged man. I found Naruto-kun in the district, he said in a loud, lowly voice. Hiruzen's eyes widened and his knuckles turned white. Take me to him, he commanded harshly. Inu nodded and whispered, I found him in the basement of Daichi's shop, he was unconscious, but he was stable. The aged man breathed a sigh of relief and composed himself, he wished they could move faster, but as Hokage, he had an appearance to keep. The shop was in mayhem. It looked like an explosion had gone off in the main room. Merchandise was thrown everywhere, and there were scorch marks where the cash register had been. Down the stairs, Hiruzen saw the young boy sprawled out on the floor. Has he been hurt? Hiruzen asked Inu. I'm not sure. What do you mean? Take a look at his face. Hiruzen crouched over the boy and turned his head towards him. A large scar that ran horizontally to his face was visible. It was almost fully healed. Still, he didn't like that there was a scar in the first place. It looks like a rather deep wound, Inu, have you checked his eye for any damage? He remained silent as if uncertain of what to say. Hiruzen glanced back at him. Inu? I did, but please check it yourself, Hokage-sama. Hiruzen was unnerved a little by Inu's disinclination, to say the least, even in situations that affected him. Inu was as professional as it got. To hear him answer such a straightforward question with such trepidation made him a bit cautious. Still, Hiruzen moved his hand to Naruto's scarred eye, and when he pulled back his eyelid, he couldn't believe what he saw. A red pinwheel that resembled a shuriken swirled and stared back at the aged man. He recognized it as Shisui's Sharingan. Hiruzen sat there for a solid minute, pondering what he should do before finally saying, Inu, disregard all other objectives you have been given and take him to Safe House 401 as soon as possible. Inu shakily bowed and moved to gather the 6-year-old when Hiruzen stopped him. As of now, this is S-rank classified intel. You are to share this under no circumstances without my express permission. Do you understand? Yes, Hokage-sama. Good, now leave before anyone sees you. Inu slung the boy on his shoulder and carried him out of the dilapidated shop. Hiruzen stood back up and sighed heavily. Must that boy be burdened with more than he already was? He thought to himself. There was no way out now. Naruto would have to become a ninja earlier than Hiruzen wished for. The boy would be ostracized even more than he already was. Neighboring factions might try to take the eye for themselves. He remembered the boy asking him about the Anbu branch earlier that day. Do you think I could be one of those Anbu? May Minato and Kushina forgive me for what I must do, he thought to himself. His hand had been forced and now they were crossing a bridge they couldn't retreat from. Naruto, of course, would most likely have to be inducted into the Anbu Corps. Hiruzen pinched the bridge of his nose and sighed heavily once again. He slowly moved up the stairs, his shoulders sagging. I really am getting too old for this, he chuckled mirthlessly as he reached the top of the stairs. Safe House 401. Naruto first became aware of the bandages covering his face, specifically the applications covering his right eye, twitching badly from what he could tell. The second thing he became aware of was the pounding headache he had. Oh, you're finally awake, a voice said. You've had a pretty rough night. I'd suggest you stay in bed. Naruto shot out of bed and immediately regretted it as his headache became worse. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a young man with messy white hair and a dog mask. Inu. Naruto cried, Itachi didn't mean it. He was trying to protect the village. Naruto broke down into an incoherent blubbering mess after that phrase. Inu was beyond perplexed by what Naruto had said. He sat down on the bed next to the boy and awkwardly patted the sniffling boy's head. "If you can calm down, you'll be able to explain the situation to me," he gently explained. After a few minutes of hiccuping and gentle rubs on the back, Naruto fell silent. "Are you ready to explain?" Naruto nodded and repeated the tale that Itachi told the young boy. By the end, Naruto was in tears again and Inu sat in shock next to him. Inu realized after a few minutes that Naruto had fallen asleep again. Inu left the room and entered the living room pondering the story that he was told. He found that he, too, like Naruto, was exhausted from the events that had occurred during the night and lay down on the couch, determined to get some shut-eye. He didn't need to guard the safe house. 401 was practically an impenetrable fortress. It used to be the Uzumaki compound, but because they had been nearly obliterated, the council thought it prudent to allocate it to a more practical purpose due to the robust seals protecting the compound. How ironic, Inu thought to himself, that Naruto is the first person to be in this house in 6 years. He then drifted off to sleep. A few hours later, he was stirred by a swift whack to his mask by something wooden. "Hokage-sama?" he asked bleary-eyed. "Indeed, how's our young charge?" the aged man replied, holding his pipe in his hand. Mildly traumatized by the situation, "I'm not sure that he knows about the eye." Hiruzen nodded and the pair were silent for a moment. Inu finally asked, "Is it true?" "Is what true?" "That the Uchiha were planning a coup." Hiruzen's eyes widened slightly for a moment. He sighed heavily and reached into his robes for his more expensive tobacco. He did not have a tool on him, so he mashed the tobacco into his pipe with his thumb. The first layer he pressed down on was somewhat hard, the second less, and the third even less. This systematic process took the Hokage around a minute and when he was done, Hiruzen lit the pipe with a small fire jutsu. He deeply sucked the smoke into his lungs through his mouth and expelled it through his nose, filling the room with the scent of pipe tobacco. His shoulders sagged and somehow he looked 20 years older than his actual age. "Yes," Hiruzen finally said. Inu took off his mask, revealing Kakashi Haddock, and looked up at his superior. "So what are you going to do about this whole situation now?" he asked. "Itachi will be branded a traitor and his name will be put in the bingo books," Hiruzen calmly explained. "How can you justify that?" Kakashi all but shouted. "He averted what could have been a civil war and you're just going to throw him to the wayside like a broken tool." Hiruzen was silent for a moment and replied, "Itachi asked me to it so that his clan's honor would not be tarnished." Kakashi looked away at that. "We've got to posture as if nothing is wrong," Hiruzen said, opting to change the subject. "Especially in regards to Kumo, they might try and pull a stunt as they did 3 years ago. That was a political disaster, to say the least." During a diplomatic meeting, the Kumo shinobi attempted to kidnap the heiress to the Hyuga clan. They were caught. Still, Kumo had plausible deniability in regards to the situation and claimed they knew nothing about it. They then had the gall to ask for the head of the man who had killed the shinobi, who happened to be Hisashi Hyuga. In a series of events to which Hiruzen was not privy, his twin brother was sent instead. "The Inyazuka will take over the police will Genin and Chunin to reinforce them," continued Hiruzen. "I will call an emergency meeting in the morning to discuss this with the council. The village will be put in a state of lockdown for a week or so to give the appearance of control over the situation. In the meantime, I want you to stay here with Naruto. My previous order concerning you and Naruto fraternizing is rescinded." Though the young man wasn't showing it, he was relieved with the last statement. The old Hokage had ordered him to stay away from Naruto for his protection. It would have been very convenient for the 4th Hokage student to meet with a village orphan with spiky blonde hair. While Kakashi understood the order, it didn't mean he liked it. But the order decommissioned, he could finally help Naruto from outside of the shadows. "Man, this place is just depressing," Naruto groaned. He was standing in what looked like a sewer with water covering about a half inch of the floor. He had been walking through the place for a while now, but it didn't seem to lead anywhere. "I wonder if there is a way out of here," he muttered to himself, wondering whether he was just going to be stuck here forever. Nevertheless, he kept on walking, hoping to see an exit out of the tunnel. Suddenly he could see something ahead of him, with a yippee. He ran toward what he thought to be an exit, only to be met with broad iron bars with a piece of paper that said seal. "What the hell is this place?" Naruto muttered, staring at what looked to be a giant cage. "My hell, my own personal hell," a deep ominous voice from behind the cages said. "Who's there?" Naruto shouted, suddenly afraid. "Come closer and I'll tell you," the voice called out. Naruto came up to the bars when a clawed, orange, and covered in fur, slammed into the bars, making a sound like a hammer striking an anvil, only amplified by about 100 times. Then a large red eye appeared out of the darkness, frightening the boy further. "With all the bad luck I have, you would have been given that cursed eye," the being roared. "The eye of the traitor to my father's will." Naruto was scared witless at this point, but as the boy was prone to do in dire situations, he hid it under a veneer of confidence. "What the hell are you talking about, you bastard?" he yelled angrily. The being just chuckled, "Look into the water, you fool." The boy reluctantly looked into the water and what he saw surprised him. Red eye with a pinwheel pattern in the middle stared back at the young boy. Naruto's eyes widened as he remembered Itachi's words. "I am going to give you a gift." "What in the world?" he said out loud. The being said nothing but released a roar that sent the boy back to the land of the living. Chapter 2. Naruto's eyes flew wide open, vividly recalling the dream that he had. Or was it a dream? He wasn't sure. There were no windows in the small room he had slept in, and there was no clock to tell the time. Inu wasn't in the bedroom this time, and the place was eerily quiet. Suddenly he remembered the being that pointed out his eye. Naruto felt the bandages that covered his right eye and felt his stomach turn itself inside out. If it was real, what was that thing, and what was the eye for that matter? Ripping off the bandages, he was suddenly hit by a wave of nausea. He held his hand out in front of him, which he seemed to be seeing double of, more specifically as if his eye was trying to predict where his hand would be a second later. He tied the bandages around his eye, leaving the implanted one clear of any obstructions. This time he seemed to see the prediction only. "What the hell is this thing?" he murmured. Getting out of bed, he exited the room he had spent the last night in and entered the living room. "Man, this place is sad," Naruto said. It had looked like all the paint had been stripped off and what was left was wood and concrete, giving a prison-like feel. There was furniture, a table, chairs, and a couch, but it wasn't very much. Wanting to study his eye further, he exited the room and entered the bathroom. Peering into the mirror, he saw the eye with the strange markings on it. Naruto remembered what the being said the night before. "The eye of the traitor to my father's will," he murmured. "Enjoying your new toy?" a voice said. "Ah." Naruto whirled to the doorway and saw Kakashi. "Inu. You scared me," Naruto exclaimed. Kakashi simply waved his hand, giving Naruto his trademark one-eyed smile. "It's Kakashi. I'm off duty." So that's your real name?" "Yup." Kakashi nonchalantly twirled around, headed back to the living room. "You hungry, kid?" Naruto's stomach growled at that, to which Kakashi chuckled. "Don't worry. I'll find something in here," and started to forage through the cupboards, attempting to find something edible for the pair to eat. The boy turned back to the mirror, examining the eye once again. "What exactly is this thing?" Naruto asked. "It's a Sharingan," Kakashi replied, not bothering to turn back to him. "What is it supposed to do?" "Well, do you want the long or short?" "Huh? You can predict people's movements with it," Kakashi said, still not bothering to look back. "Ah, here we go, you want pork or chicken ramen?" "Chicken, please," the boy said. "Alrighty then," Kakashi took 2 of the packets from the cupboard and got to business. Naruto, at this point, had moved from the bathroom back to the living room. "So how long am I going to stay here?" "Not sure." "Do you know why I'm here specifically?" "Yes, but I'm not allowed to answer that." "What even is this place?" "That's classified." "Can you give me any straight answers?" "Considering the nature of your questions, no." Naruto threw his hands up at that and moved to the couch, glowering as he went. The next 10 minutes were spent in silence, with Naruto brooding on the couch and Kakashi aptly ignoring the sulking boy. "Do you know what's going to happen to me?" he said, finally breaking the silence. Kakashi hummed, still looking at the ramen. "Well, Hokage-sama has ordered me to train you because of that eye currently stuck in your head." At this point, he stopped to ladle out the ramen into 2 bowls. "After that? Well, I haven't been told anything, but considering you are now aware of classified intel, you'll probably be moved to a branch of the Anbu, most likely patrol and escort division." Old Naruto would have been ecstatic at that, but seeing Itachi and how he turned out was a little more than nervous. "No, you won't end up like him," Kakashi said as he brought the 2 bowls of ramen over to the table. Itachi was exposed to war and death at an early age, along with having to bear the burdens of being a prodigy and firstborn. Naruto didn't feel convinced. Nevertheless, he moved over to the table and started eating his ramen. "You'll need to cover that eye up, for now, it'll mess up your timing and it'll constantly drain chakra," Kakashi commented as he somehow ate through his mask. "I'll put the bandages back on." Good." The rest of the morning was spent in silence as Naruto lounged around the house while Kakashi read his book until he felt his tattoo tingle slightly like a small electric current was being applied to it. "I've got to go." Why?" "Hokage-sama requested my presence." With that, he disappeared like a ghost and Naruto was left to his own devices in the empty house. Hiruzen was tired, so very very tired. The council last night had been in a complete uproar about the situation. As to be expected, it wasn't the smoothest of meetings. However, Danzo was not present, so at least some of the fallout was mitigated. Speaking of which, he would be visiting his quarters today. It could hardly be called a house, considering here is hidden in the root base underneath the city. Hiruzen shivered as he thought about having to go through the Anbu tunnels. Nevertheless, it had to be done. He and Danzo had become estranged these last few years, especially after Minato's death. They had grown distant due to the differing philosophies the two men held. Even now, Hiruzen held a deep respect for the man, despite the sheer brutality of his methods. He could rely on Danzo to make the best decision for Konoha, even if it meant making a trail of bodies, friends, and foes alike. Hiruzen hated to admit it, but Danzo had been right. The old Hokage had failed to keep the situation under control. This whole debacle was the result of his mishaps. Sometimes he wondered if the afterlife awaiting him would be the faces of the dead, never speaking, faces neutral, but forever judging him. He dreamt about it enough to believe it. He turned his thoughts to Naruto and sighed. How can that boy get in any more of a mess than he already does? Hiruzen thought. Frankly, this was his excuse to let Kakashi be around the boy a bit more, but he still couldn't help but groan when he thought about the eye. And Itachi had given away classified intel. He couldn't understand how it had happened. To say that Hiruzen was worried about Naruto was a gross understatement. He was absolutely terrified. Now that he was practically going to have to force the boy into his apparent vocation years before Naruto was intended to. Hiruzen felt a sense of dread as to how this would affect him. Kakashi had already told him how Naruto had woken up in the middle of the night and started sobbing out Itachi's story. Anbu at this age would surely have a lasting effect on him. Little Sasuke was an entirely different matter altogether. Currently, he was in a pseudo-catatonic state. Knowing the Uchiha clan, though, it would be highly likely that he would be obsessed with killing Itachi and could become a potential flight risk in the future. Of course, Hiruzen's advisors were already talking about how the boy should be taking multiple wives as to rebuild the clan. He shivered as he thought about it. So yes, Hiruzen was exhausted. His thoughts were interrupted by Kakashi walking through the door. You wanted to see me, Hokage-sama. Indeed I did, this meeting has to do with your young soon-to-be charge. Hiruzen paused at this, taking a moment to blow tobacco smoke through his nose. Your team will be taken off the rotating roster and will be put in the patrol and escort division next week, and you will be taken off the rosters entirely. This action is to give you the time to train Naruto correctly. You are allowed to use all Anbu-approved methods of training him. He paused again, this time staying entirely still. He will be briefed on his status as a Jinchuriki. Hiruzen finally said, eyes downcast. Kakashi's surprise was apparent. Why? Hiruzen's eyes became hard. He is no longer a boy, Kakashi, he is a ninja and will be treated as such. And what of his parents? What of them? Am I to tell him of his parents as well? The older man's eyes never wavered as he sighed internally. They had always had a bit of a cold war in regards to Naruto. Kakashi wanted the best for Naruto, full disclosure on his status and his parents, including his mother's clan. Hiruzen was of a similar mind. However, his job required him to put the priorities of the village above the boy, limiting what he could honestly give to the boy. Thus Kakashi would often get close to the edge of disobedience, close enough that Hiruzen had him under his eye, but never close enough that he couldn't claim credible deniability. You may reveal who his mother was and his clan at the end of his training, his father shall remain unnamed. Kakashi looked appeased but still slightly frustrated. Yes, Hokage-sama, he responded curtly. You are dismissed. Kakashi turned back to the door before the aged man said. The eye has not been told to any of the council members. As such, they believe that you and Sasuke are the only surviving Sharingan users, barring Itachi, of course. They have insisted that you teach him when he comes of age, either in a three-man cell or as an apprenticeship. The young ninja nodded softly and left as quickly as he had come. Hiruzen sighed once more, breathing tobacco smoke out his nose. Well, it went better than I thought it would. Kakashi moved through the tunnels at a quick pace, anxious to get back to Naruto. He was thankful for the Hokage's permission. He was planning on telling the boy anyway, but it didn't hurt that wouldn't get in serious trouble for it. He understood why they wouldn't tell him of his father. As changed as Naruto seemed in the last few hours, they weren't willing to take the risk that he would reveal it to anyone else. A situation that all parties involved would like to avoid due to the hostility towards said father from neighboring villages. Still, he couldn't help but be resentful towards his superior, regardless of motives. Reaching the manhole to enter back into the safe house, he was surprised by the lack of noise emanating from the clan compound turned safe house. I'm back. He called. Only silence met him and he became even more suspicious. Kakashi searched the compound with growing concern. Finding that it was utterly empty sent him into a semi-panicked mode. Finally, after he had double-checked and triple-checked the place, he ran through 5 hand seals and slammed his outstretched hand on the ground and in a puff of smoke, his Ninken appeared. A small pug with a konoha headband looked up at him, tilting his head slightly. What'd you need? I need you to search the compound for a scent. Kakashi thought for a second about what Hana had told him once. It should smell vaguely like a fox. The pug shrugged his shoulders, or at least what Kakashi took to be a shrugging motion, and began to search the compound. After a few minutes of searching, the pug neared the manhole. "I've found it, you were right. It does smell like a fox. Whatever it was, it went down here and entered the tunnels." Kakashi's stomach dropped like lead. Is the scent still strong? Can we find him in the tunnels? Desperation slightly creeped into his voice. The Ninken grunted and said, "Should be able to." Kakashi wasted no time moving the cover aside and jumped into the tunnels, followed by the pug. "It leads this way." The pug motioned to their right and went down the tunnel with Kakashi following close behind him. The tunnels were mostly quiet, though a few patrols passed them with silent acknowledgement passing between the parties. After going for what seemed to be miles, they finally arrived at the exit. The cave opening, hidden to the outside by a mixture of Fuinjutsu and Jinjutsu, faced them. As they stepped through the exit, they found themselves outside the village walls and in the forest surrounding Konoha. "The trail is weaker here, but I can still smell it." Kakashi nodded, "We're looking for a 6-year-old boy with blonde hair." The pug grunted in confirmation and resumed tracking the scent. Finally, they were led by the scent to a dirt path that seemed to go even farther away from the village. As the pair got on the way, Kakashi realized where they were. By the sage, no. He panicked as he picked up his pace to a considerable degree. If he puts on the mask he's done for. Kakashi soon came to the foot of a dilapidated shrine, a shrine that held the swirl atop its roof, synonymous with Konoha and the people of Yuzu. But Kakashi paid no attention to that. Instead of admiring the swirl or feeling pity at the state of the shrine, he sped through the entrance. As he entered the main room, he was greeted by a sight that frightened him even more. On the floor once again was an unconscious Uzumaki Naruto lying on the shrine's cold wooden ground. Near him was an Oni mask with a scroll next to him. Kakashi rushed to Naruto's side, checking for any discrepancies in his health. Nothing seemed to be wrong with him, but his unconscious state, his pulse was fine slightly sped up, and he didn't have a fever. That didn't stop Kakashi checking him double and triple for any wounds or any signs of poison. Finally satisfied with his quick medical examination did he finally relax. It seemed that Naruto had not put on any of the masks. If he did, Kakashi would have been viewing a corpse rather than an unconscious boy. His eyes turned to the scroll, which he noticed had the swirl, much like the shrine had. Opening the scroll revealed the words Contingency Scroll number 0. Underneath the characters were multiple storage seals. Kakashi thought about it with some interest, but his main goal was to get Naruto back to the safe house. "This boy is going to give me a heart attack one of these days." A few hours earlier. Naruto was less than happy about his current living arrangements. Frankly, this place creeped him the hell out. It felt like it had been stripped to its very essentials and was left like such. There were no decorations, no furniture outside what was required, and no paint. Naruto did not like it in the least. But what was even worse was the silence of the place. Naruto's apartment was out of the way relatively, so there wasn't much noise, but he usually had his window open so that he could always listen to the outside's ambient sounds. Plus, he always was thinking and doing other things, so he never had much time to complete the silence. Thus the change to a completely silent concrete room was jarring. Naruto didn't think it could get any worse until he heard the whispers. The whispers weren't precisely audible, but Naruto could make out what they wanted at least. And they wanted him to go through the manhole he had found a few minutes before when the whispers started. "I'm not going through that damn manhole," he muttered through gritted teeth. He was currently lying on his bed with the sheets thrown over his body, including his head. Every time he audibly voiced his reluctance to go through the manhole, the whispers seemed to be more forceful. He fought with the whispers for several more minutes until finally, "Damn it, alright," Naruto shouted and threw the covers off of him. The manhole was in one of the back rooms of the place. With some trepidation, Naruto moved towards the manhole with the whispers becoming louder, but not more understandable. Moving aside the grate, he was met with darkness. Losing his nerve, he moved away from the manhole without turning his back. Just when he was about to turn around a hand he couldn't see shoved him down the hole. With a startled yell, he fell down the shaft, crashing in a heap on the tunnel's floor. As he lay on the concrete, heard the scrape of metal on stone as his primary light source was extinguished, the manhole had been closed. The whispers were growing louder as Naruto stumbled to his feet, urging him to go down the tunnel on the right. As he realized he couldn't go back up, he reluctantly followed the path they were sending him on. The tunnels were mostly silent and he encountered no one on his way. Finally, he came to a halt at a cave opening. As he exited the cave, the entrance disappeared. On that odd note, he realized that it was night and that he was in a forest now, somewhere Naruto had never been. Naruto would have called himself lost, but the whispers seemed to know where they were. With more prodding from the hints, he made a beeline towards whatever they were leading him to. Finally, he stumbled into a clearing that contained a shrine. The shrine seemed to be in a bad state of disrepair as one of the entrance beams had collapsed and there were leaves and debris all over the porch. Nevertheless, he braved the entrance and entered the main room. The room was in the same state as the porch, with dirt and dust piling up everywhere. But that isn't what caught the boy's attention. What did catch the boy's attention was the large assortment of masks on the far wall. It was one of the more unassuming masks, but it was still freaking out nonetheless. The whispers reached a crescendo, and they finally said the only thing that had made sense all night. "That's the one." With that, Naruto's hand seemed to move on its own and grab the mask. The whispers stopped completely, and Naruto was left to listen to the wind rustle the leaves outside as he inspected the Oni mask. It was a typical mask, at least for one of its kind. Instead of putting it on, he turned it over to its back, where he found a small seal that said storage on where his head would have met his forehead. Without much thinking, he put his palm onto the seal and said, "Activate." This action caused several things. First was some excruciating pain as his chakra was prematurely unlocked, without any warm-ups either. The second was a large puff of smoke which choked him up. The third was that something fell out of the seal and clattered to the ground. With that, Naruto promptly passed out from the pain caused to his Tenketsu system. Naruto's eyes opened, and he was in the same bed that he had found himself in that morning. For some reason he felt that he was going to find himself waking up in this bed quite a lot. Groaning, he sat up in his bed and jumped off of it. Moving out into the living room he found Kakashi once again, this time, instead of reading his small orange book, he was reading a scroll. "What's that?" Naruto asked. "I should be asking you that," Kakashi replied with a hard eye turned towards Naruto. "What the hell did you think you were doing? I had no clue where you were and when I found you, you were passed out on the floor of the mask shrine." Naruto had the decency to look sheepish as he cowered under Kakashi's stern gaze. "I heard voices." "You heard what?" "I heard voices." Naruto shouted indignantly, "and they wouldn't leave me alone." Kakashi looked incredulous at Naruto's response. "So you decided to follow them by yourself instead of waiting for someone like me or Hokage-sama? Naruto, I cannot stress the ridiculousness of the decision you made. What if these voices were an enemy trying to lure you out?" he rhetorically asked. "You would be dead right now, that's what." Naruto stood there awkwardly, dutifully receiving the verbal reprimand he was getting. His spirits were wilting as Kakashi continued ranting. Kakashi sighed, putting his hand over his face. "Just don't go doing something without consulting me. I'm going to be your teacher for the next 6 months, which means you're going to have to follow my directions to the letter." "Yes, sensei." Kakashi stopped rambling as he looked over at the boy, he was on the verge of tears. He sighed again. "I'm not mad, Naruto, I just don't want anything bad to happen to you." "Why do you care anyways? You hate me just like everyone else, you only care because Jiji told you to take care of me." At this point, Naruto was openly crying and snot poured out of his nose. At this, Kakashi remained silent for a few seconds, with Naruto's crying being the only thing he heard. "Kushina Uzumaki." At that Naruto looked up at the ninja who had a faraway look in his eyes. "My mother died when I was young and my father committed harakiri. After I became a ninja, Kushina was like family to me." Naruto stopped crying at that, but he was still sniffling. His whole world had been shifted once again for the second time in the past few days. Was she my mom?" he whispered tearfully. Kakashi sighed once more. "Yeah." Naruto stood there for a second and then crawled into Kakashi's lap, startling the man. What was she like?" he hiccuped. Kakashi thought for a few seconds. "She was loud and brash, but she was very brave and a very strong ninja." "Did she love me?" "Naruto, I'm not sure there was anything in the world she loved more than you. Can you tell me stories about her?" "Well, there was one time," as Kakashi regaled stories about Kushina to the boy, Naruto felt his eyes becoming droopy. As much as he tried to fight it, he soon found himself drifting off to the peaceful land of sleep. Kakashi must have gone off for quite some time about Kushina, making sure that he left Minato out of the stories before he realized that Naruto had fallen sound asleep on his lap. Kakashi sighed for what felt like the millionth time that night. He truly had no idea how to go about training, much less a 6-year-old child. Anbu training usually consisted of about 3 months, but considering that Naruto was a complete beginner, they were realistically looking at about 9 months of training, and that was pushing. Along with that, Naruto still was just a child, he was going to have to take that into consideration. He knew this was going to be incredibly difficult, but he wasn't willing to delegate the task to anyone else for obvious reasons. He had a debt to pay, and he cared deeply about the boy. At least the scroll Naruto had uncovered would help considerably with training. Upon inspection of the scrolls, he had discovered that they were mostly training manuals. More specifically, they were training manuals for Uzumaki, who happened to find themselves in Konoha without any guidance. Kakashi had leafed through some of them, but he was planning on reading them later. He laughed out loud as he thought about where they had been placed. No fancy seals, no secret codes, just on the back of a mask. Unfortunately, his laughter seemed to wake Naruto up. "Sorry for waking you." Kakashi apologized sincerely. "It's alright," Naruto mumbled, rubbing his eyes and then placing his head on Kakashi's chest. "When are we gonna start training?" he asked, still a bit bleary. Kakashi thought about that, considering that he would have to plan out a 9-month training course for him. 2 weeks, I think, Kakashi replied. Naruto grunted in appreciation. Kakashi thought he had gone back to sleep when he said. "Hey Kakashi. MHM. Can we paint the walls, they're kinda boring." Kakashi chuckled, somehow thinking he was going to enjoy the next few months with him. Chapter 3. Beginning training for an Uzumaki can generally be difficult due to our innate characteristic of increased chakra levels. Understanding chakra and, more specifically, utilizing chakra and harnessing it must be a priority among our clan's children. It can be challenging to go toe-to-toe in pure ninjutsu combat for an Uzumaki if this process is not undertaken. As such, it is crucial to master water walking, not only because it is a good chakra control exercise, but because it is a rite of passage for the clan. To begin, the Kage Bunshin is an excellent place to start. The technique's usefulness is due to the fact that the jutsu holds no real difficulty, other than the fact that it consumes a large amount of chakra, something that an Uzumaki should have no problems with in regards to the technique. Another good starter technique is the hinge, though the trainee should try to create a solid chakra layer, rather than merely a visible one. Once the trainee has mastered these techniques, they can move on to less chakra-intensive techniques can. Kakashi rolled up the scroll at this. "Well, the scrolls left at the temple were useful," Kakashi mused while throwing the scroll in his hand up and down, eyeing the others he had on his desk in his bedroom. He had never asked Kushina much about her clan while she was alive. She would often become distraught when it was brought up due to the fact that she was the only known survivor of her clan. Thus no one had the heart to ask her such in-depth questions about her clan. It was something that he had been severely regretting not asking her since being told that he would be taking on Naruto's training. But due to Naruto's luck, or naivety, he now had a better understanding of their physiology, other than significant chakra reserves, something that he was supremely appreciative of. Armed with the information he had been given from the scroll, a training regime was forming in his head. The first few months would be mastering the basic ninjutsu and some strategy and theory on all 4 techniques trees. After that, Shuriken Jutsu and Kinjutsu would be next on the plate. The pair would go over some basic katas for Taijutsu, but they wouldn't focus too much on it. Naruto was so young that it wouldn't help him learn a style that he could use now, but not in a year and a half because of physical growth. Finally, going over more advanced techniques and sparring will be the last few things on the list. It wasn't fantastic, but it was the very best he could do, considering the fact he had about 9 months to train Naruto. All he knew was that they weren't going to mess with his eye for quite a while. With a large amount of physical energy molded into his chakra, Naruto could make the eye reject him from the absence of any substantial spiritual energy. He had about a week before their allotted time began, so he could still work out the kinks for the time being. Speaking of Naruto, he thought, grabbing a storage scroll. Kakashi found Naruto sitting on the couch, attempting to meditate. He had told the boy of his status as the jailer of the Kyuubi as early as this past week. He had told Naruto that it would be best to learn to control his emotions. That being said, it can be rather tricky for a person as outgoing and empathetic as Naruto to control themselves, much less if they're 6 years old. With that in mind, Kakashi suggested mediation. Though the way Naruto's face was pulled into a grimace indicated that he was still getting to grips with the technique. It was an almost essential skill for a ninja to have, even more so as a Jinchuriki. Still, the grumbling was amusing. "I'm going out. I have to get a new book." No reply was given, but Kakashi saw Naruto's eyes scrunched harder. He shrugged and sauntered over through the compound to the manhole. It was much less convenient than just having a damn door, but oh well, secrecy and all. The village was still reeling from the Uchiha massacre. It was evident by the sheer quietness of the place, not to mention how empty it was. One would think it would be a ghost town if there weren't Chunin patrols going up and down every street. The Jounin thought it reminded him of the Third Shinobi War, and a slight nostalgia washed over him. Remember all the shitty missions he took on. Kakashi didn't like them at the time, no one did, but he couldn't but feel a small amount of wistfulness when he thought about those weeks. His squad, huddling around a campfire out in the no man's land that was the Iowa-Konoha border. Those were the days, Kakashi mused out loud, wandering down the main street. In reality, he wasn't picking up a new Uchiha book as much as he wished it to be the case. Instead, he would get training manuals and other supplies that he would need in the coming months at the supply center and a few other things from various other shops. Kakashi was reasonably confident that he could teach Naruto the shinobi arts. However, considering the boy was just out of his toddler phase, he was a little out of his depth. The supply depot was a pretty dull-looking building compared to some other buildings in the village. A square concrete building that reached some 20 feet in the air greeted Kakashi as he turned the corner. Entering the depot, he was greeted by a chunin at the front desk. "Ah, Kakashi-san, what can I do for you today?" "I need to place an order," Kakashi replied casually. "In that case, please fill out one of these please." The chunin slid a piece of paper that contained the order. The sound of pencil meeting paper was the only thing that was heard due to its quietness. While the chunin looked mildly uncomfortable as she peered up expectantly at him, Kakashi paid neither her nor the silence any mind. His hand stopped over weapons. Kakashi pondered the question. He hadn't thought about training Naruto with anything other than the standard issue Chukodo given to Anbu members. As he stood there, thinking it over, an idea occurred to him. Did Naruto know how to read and write? It was a reasonably pedestrian question. But Kakashi just realized that considering Naruto's age, and intelligence for that matter, there was a reasonable chance that he didn't know how to read basic hiragana and kanji. The Anbu member put his palm to his face and sighed, which only served to make the chunin even more uncomfortable. "Is something the matter?" No, well, yes, but it doesn't matter," Kakashi replied in a somewhat exasperated tone. Oh, I see," she hastily returned. The awkward silence resumed as Kakashi filled out the final pieces of information that the order needed. When he handed it to her, he added. "Could you put in an order for a book on hiragana and kanji as well?" The silence was so uncomfortable now that the chunin was visibly sweating. Yes, I believe that can be arranged," she said weakly, wondering why the hell Kakashi Haddock would ever need a book on essential reading and writing when the order's stated purpose was personal training. "Well, if that's all, I'll be going now," Kakashi said, none the wiser to the chunin's confusion and consternation, and walked out the door. The rest of the trip was mostly uneventful. Still, Kakashi decided to make the most of it by going and getting groceries and checking up on Naruto's apartment while staying at the compound. His apartment wasn't the best looking place, with stuff strewn all over the place. But the worst place definitely was the training room. Naruto didn't really have a use for the training room yet, so the boy could think of the best thing to stuff all his junk into the small room. With another ripple of exasperation, Kakashi created a shadow clone. The clone looked at him with a small amount of betrayal in his eyes. Still, it dutifully started picking up the mess that Naruto had made. Kakashi took a minute to look through the rest of the blonde's apartment. It had the same problem as the training room, but to a lesser degree than the former. He opened the refrigerator to find that there wasn't much in it. Some milk and green onions, but that was about it. Kakashi then opened his cabinets and found out why. They were chock full of ramen packets. "That explains it," Kakashi said sardonically. His bedroom was in a mildly better state, but his bed wasn't made and his window was open, so there were a few flies in his room. Coming back out into the main room, he saw that the clone was almost done cleaning and organizing the training room that Naruto would inevitably be using quite shortly. Kakashi dispelled the clone and winced as a flood of memories entered his mind. He would never get used to that. The trip back to the compound was mostly uneventful. Kakashi talked with a few chunins and jonins that he knew. Still, he didn't run into any trouble, Mido guy, so he was rather content as Kakashi climbed back up the manhole into the compound after entering the Anbu tunnels. Surprisingly, Naruto had not left his spot after a few hours, or at least if he did, Kakashi didn't know. He looked more compassed than when Kakashi had left the house, to his surprise. Well, he's taking it seriously. Kakashi mused. He didn't want to interrupt the boy's concentration. But it had to be done. Hey. Naruto's eyes didn't open. Hello. The snore came from the boy's mouth. Kakashi facepalmed for the second time today. What did I expect? A 6-year-old to be able to do meditation? He grumbled to himself. An idea suddenly popped into his mind as he stood there. As Kakashi mulled the thought over in his mind, an evil grin made itself apparent even with the mask over his face. That'll teach him to follow orders. Kakashi chuckled sadistically. Naruto woke up to the feeling of wind blowing harshly against his face and hair. His eyes snapped open as he attempted to take in the world around him. He could tell he was in a forest of some kind, though he couldn't pinpoint his exact location other than near a tree because of one simple fact. Naruto had been tied upside down to said tree. What the hell? Naruto yelled, struggling against his bonds. Kakashi appeared beside him. Ah, you're finally awake. If looks could kill, Kakashi would most undoubtedly have died. What's the big idea? This is your first lesson. What do you mean my first lesson? How am I supposed to learn anything like this? Kakashi sighed and rolled his eyes. Your first lesson is to do everything I say, and if you can't do that, at least learn to be able to deceive me. Naruto crossed his arms and turned his head away, pouting. That stupid exercise was boring anyway. All I was doing was sitting there and doing nothing. Naruto, I told you already you're the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. You have to be in control of your emotions and not let them take hold of you. How the hell is sitting in one place and doing nothing supposed to help that? Naruto was fuming. How was he supposed to stay awake? Naruto, you're part of the Anbu now. Your life will get exponentially harder from here on out. If you can't do a simple meditation exercise, what are you going to do when you have to spend days in the pouring rain with no spare clothes? Kakashi asked rhetorically. Naruto finally had the decency to look sheepish at his words. What will happen when you have to carry a comrade 50 miles back while also being injured? What will happen when you have to hold off multiple opponents when you've been awake for 72 hours? What happens when? Alright, I get it. Naruto yelled. I'm dumb and lazy and… Kakashi grabbed him by the hair and pulled him closer. No, it's obvious that you don't understand anything, Kakashi rasped in a harsh whisper. The Anbu are the first and last lines of defense of the village. We are the best of the best, there is no excuse for failure, and there is no room for bullshit, do you understand me? Naruto nodded weakly, and Kakashi let go of his hair, letting him swing back. Kakashi internally winced even though he didn't show it. For the second time today, he had overestimated Naruto. He needed to remember that he was dealing with a 6-year-old child, not a genin or chunin recruit. Kakashi decided right then and there that this would be the most challenging instruction job that he would be a party to. Kakashi sighed and cut the rope with a kunai, catching Naruto as he fell. Slinging him over his shoulder, he walked. Walking about 50 feet, they came to a clearing that made it apparent that they were above the Hokage monument. Kakashi walked up to the edge and looked at the head of the first Hokage. These men, Kakashi murmured, almost to himself, their dream is what we are honoring. Their wish is what we uphold. Their fire lives in us and will live in all generations of Konoha shinobi. Their will of fire is our will of fire. Do you understand now, Naruto? What a precious thing we are called upon to defend. Kakashi looked over to see Naruto's odd face, looking directly at him. His azure eyes piercing him like a sword. Finally, Naruto gulped and nodded enthusiastically. Why yeah, I think I do now. Kakashi chuckled and set him on his feet next to him, it was getting dark and the sun was setting. After a few moments of silence, Kakashi spoke up. You know, that view is the best view I've seen in all my life. Nowhere else even comes close. Naruto didn't respond, but out of the corner of his eye, Kakashi saw Naruto nod in an almost reverential sort of way. They stayed there in silence for the next few minutes, contemplating the sunset. Finally, when the light died, they went on their way home. When they returned home, Naruto broke the silence. Hey Kakashi. Can I meditate up there tomorrow? At the Hokage monument, I mean. Kakashi looked at him with an unreadable expression for a few seconds. Finally, he said. Sure, as long as you don't get too close to the edge. Naruto's face broke into a slight grin. Thanks, Kakashi-sensei. Kakashi smiled lightly and looked at the walls, suddenly he had an idea. We still need to paint these walls, don't we, Naruto? Naruto took one glance and then nodded emphatically. Oh yeah. We do. Kakashi turned back to Naruto and leaned over to him in a conspiratorial manner. Why'd you say I teach you a trick to make painting 10 times quicker tomorrow? Naruto nodded emphatically once more. Kakashi stood up. But I'll only show it to you if you go to bed straight away. Naruto gasped and quickly ran to his room and flung the covers over his body. Kakashi watched it and chuckled. What an evening. He chortled to himself. The next morning. After dropping Naruto off up at the Hokage monument at around 10 in the morning, Kakashi went over to the Genin Academy to talk with a few instructors. He figured if anyone knew how to turn hyperactive kids into a ninja, they could at least give him a few pointers. However, as he spoke to a few of them, he realized that, no, they had nearly nothing helpful in regards to teaching children how to become ninja in a short period of time. The majority of the time that the children spent at the academy was mainly learning theory and memorizing historical facts. This annoyed Kakashi to such a degree that he planned on meeting the Hokage later that week to issue a complaint about it. However, he had more important things to do. Kakashi decided to head back to the safe house and pore over the scrolls to better understand what he was working with. This idea proved to be much more successful and interesting than his first idea. Not only was it helpful in enlightening Kakashi on how to train children, it even included some basic historical facts about Uchiha and the history of the Uzumaki clan. According to the scrolls, the Uzumaki clan started with the firstborn son of the second son of the sage. Apparently, he had been brash, rude, and reckless. Oftentimes he would get into constant fights with his younger brother, the future patriarch of the Senju clan. This became such an issue that his father banished him to Uchiha, where he spent the next 10 years of his life in exile. During that time, he would learn to calm his anger and attitude with calligraphy and meditation. He would also discover a secret summoning clan during his stay, which he would strike a pact with. When his 10 years were up, his father asked whether the young man wished to return to his father's house. He politely declined. He had made a name for himself on the island and wanted to stay at his new home. He took a wife from one of the nearby fishing villages, the daughter of a blacksmith whom he had become good friends with on his time on the island. It is said that all the Uzumaki with red hair have it because of her red hair. Thus the Uzumaki clan was born. Kakashi sighed and put the scroll down again, realizing that he had been distracted by the historical implications of what he had read. So he's related to the Senju, Kakashi mused. Well, I suppose that is interesting. He hadn't gleaned much from the scroll so far, but there was a lot of material and it had given him an idea. He looked up at the clock. It was 20 past 4. Kakashi wondered if Naruto had gotten bored and wandered off. Well, it wouldn't matter. Kakashi could find him anyways. Rolling the scroll up, he got up and moved to the entrance, both to get paint and collect Naruto. At the Hokage monument. Kakashi stood in the edge of the forest, watching Naruto look out upon the village. He was a little more than amazed. He saw as Naruto watched the village, eyes open and nearly unmoving as he breathed slowly and deeply. This was the kid that fell asleep yesterday. Kakashi yelled to himself. Finally, after a few more moments of watching him, Kakashi stepped out of the forest and into the clearing. Naruto whipped around and smiled. "Hey, Kakashi-sensei." He called softly, seemingly still on his meditation high. Kakashi returned in an equally soft voice, "Hello, are you ready to learn that trick I promised you yesterday?" Naruto's eye lit up and he nodded vigorously. As like the night before, the trip back to the safe house was carried out in silence. It was only when they returned to the living room kitchen area that Kakashi broke the silence. "Alright, let me demonstrate the trick." Kakashi ran through the hand seals. Kage Bushin no Jutsu. A puff of smoke was seen and an exact replica of Kakashi stood beside him, something which awed Naruto to no end. "Wow, that's super cool. Are you really going to teach me how to do that?" Kakashi chuckled. "If I wasn't, would I have shown you?" He ran through the hand signs again. "Try to get them perfect, Naruto. It'll only work if you're able to do them exactly." Kakashi could have had Naruto use his Sharingan, but Kakashi didn't want to risk it rejecting him, at least for now. Naruto and Kakashi sat on the rug in the living room, Naruto trying to perfect the hand signs and Kakashi watching him and giving him instructions. "Your index finger isn't straight. Try doing it like that. Yeah, now you got it." Kakashi beamed as Naruto performed the hand seals slowly yet flawlessly. Naruto gave him a foxy grin as he sped up his movements, running through the seals multiple times. "Alright, now try running through the hand seals again, this time adding chakra to it. It's already been unlocked, hasn't it?" "Yup." Naruto returned. "Here I go." He flew through the hand seals and just like Kakashi, he yelled, "Kage Bunshin no Jutsu." Just like that, 3 puffs of smoke billowed out from him. When the smoke cleared, 3 sickly clones met Kakashi's eye. Stunned, Kakashi remained silent until he said, "Well, Naruto, that was an impressive first try, but not perfect. Let's try it again, shall we?" Naruto, sweaty but determined, ran through the seals again. This time a single clone popped into existence, much more solid than the other ones, but popped after a few seconds. Kakashi laughed. "Well, looks like we have a lot of practice ahead of us." They continued like this for the next hour until finally, he ran through the hand seals for the last time. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. This time 2 perfect shadow clones popped into existence. The 3 Narutos all looked at each other and then started celebrating. "Yeah, we did it. Hell yeah, we did. Look at me. I'm totally solid." One of the clones punched the other to test it. The clone hit back and they got into a fist fight, expelling each other in a cloud of smoke. Kakashi watched from the floor, trying to contain his laughter. The smoke cleared once more and one sheepish-looking Naruto was all that remained. It was now 5:30 and the pair decided that Naruto was too tired to start painting tonight, much to Naruto's disappointment. "How about I make some ramen to cheer you up?" Kakashi offered something which perked up Naruto. As Kakashi stood over the stove making ramen, he thought over the last few days as he slowly got the hang of being a master guardian of a ninja to be. There had definitely been some screw-ups on his part, but overall he thought he had done relatively well. Which reminded him. Earlier that day. When Kakashi went to go get the paint, he noticed something. In the store, there was a calligraphy set that seemed to be gathering dust. When he went to the cashier, he waved him off. "That thing? Oh, that's just an old set we've been trying to get rid of. If you want it, I can give you a discount, what'd you say?" Kakashi thought back to what he had read in the scroll about the patriarch of the Uzumaki. Perhaps calligraphy could help Naruto as well. "Sure," Kakashi replied. Kakashi left the store after that, deciding to go pick up Naruto. Present. Kakashi turned and looked where Naruto was sitting. He pulled the set out of his back pocket and placed it on the table. Naruto looked up at him in a curious manner. "What's that?" he asked. "It's a calligraphy set for drawing and making art." Naruto picked it up, opened the wooden box, picked up a brush, and eyed it quizzically. I thought you might want it since your clan was renowned for their calligraphy skills, among other things of that nature. Naruto looked back at Kakashi and beamed at him. Thank you, Kakashi-sensei. Kakashi returned the smile with a no problem. And turned back to making their dinner. At an undisclosed location, 2 days prior. Hiruzen walked along the Anbu tunnels. Following him were 2 Anbu operatives that he had brought along for the visit. Internally he was worried that Danzo would do something brash. He had always been the unpredictable one, even when they were youths. Still, Hiruzen would talk to him. After all, they had been through together, he owed at least that to him. So were they at the entrance. The trio stood in front of a stone barrier, one that would open when Hiruzen stepped forward. He looked back at the pair. Stay here and wait till I return. But Hokage-sama. The one on his right protested, is that truly wise? Hiruzen shook his head. Perhaps not, but it is something I must do alone. I owe him that much. He turned back to the stone wall and stepped close to it. Suddenly the stone shifted and fell away to reveal a large circular room. The tip of the dome was easily 50 feet in the air. In the middle stood the Warhawk of Konoha. Hiruzen took a few steps into the room. Behind him, he heard the stone slab return to its place with a large slam. Hiruzen focused his attention on Danzo. Well, Hiruzen, what did you want to talk about? Danzo asked in a sharp tone. The aged Hokage narrowed his eyes, so he was going to be like that, eh? What the hell possessed you to do such a thing? Hiruzen demanded. Danzo narrowed his eyes as well. I already told you, I did it for the good of the Vil. Do not give me any of that horseshit. Hiruzen bellowed, finally losing the temper that had been steadily increasing since he took the hat for the second time. The Uchiha were a part of the village. And you ordered a massacre of them. Danzo, uncowed by his old friend's temper, returned just as angrily. The part of the village that was plotting to destroy the rest of it. Do you know what that is called, Hiruzen? A cancer on the hull. You've been slowly pushing them over the edge ever since the Kyuubi attacked. Can you really stand there and tell me that you had nothing to do with it? No, I cannot, Danzo answered. But at least I try to clean up my own mess. Don't you dare try and change the subject. You would have let the leaf fall into civil war. Maybe Shisui could have prevented it, but for how long? Could he have really used his genjutsu on the entire clan? One of the clansmen would have done something anyway and further alienated the Uchiha from the village, undoing all of the work we would have done for months and mere days. Can you really stand there and say you had any better solution? Danzo laughed cruelly. Oh, I know. How about giving them an innocent man's head on a platter like you did with the Kumo fiasco? Danzo, perhaps I may be a fool, but at least I try to do the right thing, even if it gets people hurt. Maybe that will never be good enough, but no one will ever love a village if it does not love them. The 2 older men stood there, seemingly out of anger. They both seemed to have aged a further 20 years after their outbursts. Suddenly Danzo started to chuckle. We're both old fools, Hiruzen, both trying to live up to the same man. The Hokage bowed his head. Yes, we are, aren't we? I inherited his heart while you inherited his head. And yet neither of us is half the man he was. Danzo returned. The pair shared a mirthless yet genuine chuckle at the joke. Hiruzen finally said. Danzo, I do not wish to fight with you. We've both made terrible mistakes, done unspeakable things, all for the sake of this village. As you said, we are one of a kind. Danzo was silent for a moment and then responded in a tired voice. Perhaps it would be for the good of the village if we were to stop our petty quarrel of morals and do something more constructive. Hiruzen snorted, Danzo was ever the pragmatist. Still, at least he had listened to him in some capacity. I'm giving you a clean slate, Danzo, you have a year to do whatever you need to cancel your operations. I want your men to be cycled into the standard rosters and their seals removed. If I hear that they have continued after that period, I will have no choice but to imprison you or execute you. Danzo nodded, somehow looking older than Hiruzen at this point. What shall my position be after this? Hiruzen looked at him in silence and then finally answered. We all have to atone for our sins somehow, Danzo, either in this life or in the next. Once again, silence met the air before Hiruzen spoke again. You will be the headmaster of the Genin Academy. Silence shock met the Hokage's command. After a few moments, Hiruzen turned around and moved towards the stone slab. He looked back at Danzo one last time to see his shocked face. I pray you do the right thing, old friend, Hiruzen said, then left. Danzo was left in shock as an agent landed at his right. Danzo-sama, will we be moving forward with the plan? The right thing, Danzo murmured under his breath. Danzo-sama. No, we will not, he suddenly declared, breaking from his reverie. In a week, an anonymous donation of eyes will be made to the Konoha hospital. Do you understand me, agent? The agent seemed shocked at his master's change but nodded nonetheless. Yes, Danzo-sama, I understand. HMPH good, as you heard the old man, in a year, you will all be out of my hands. Will we be useful there, Danzo-sama? He had a smirk on his face as he replied, "Oh, I think you'll do just fine." Chapter 4. Last week marked the beginning of Naruto and Kakashi's journey together. So far, it had been relatively smooth sailing in terms of progress, and all was as Kakashi had predicted it would be. He did have Naruto learn the Kage Bunshin during the week before training started, so he did have a leg up in that department, something which Kakashi was supremely thankful for, since his Bunshin's memories could be absorbed by Naruto. It was something that Kakashi realized could be a complete game changer for Naruto's training. Considering his host and his heritage, Naruto had a ridiculous amount of chakra to spare. This meant that Naruto could potentially speed up training that might have taken him months into weeks or even days, which his newly acquired Sharingan further compounded, but they had left it alone for the time being. After all, it was more important to use 3 ninjutsu correctly than to know 10,000 and not know how to use them at all. So far, they had gotten through a good chunk of ninjutsu theory. Kakashi predicted that they would be able to move on to Jinjutsu in a few weeks, which would probably take the boy a good bit longer to learn, since it was one of the most technical technique branches of ninja jutsu. In terms of actual work, Kakashi had noticed that Naruto had taken to the calligraphy set like a fish in water, something which didn't surprise Kakashi in the slightest. What did surprise him was how quickly Naruto picked up the written language. It took him less than a week to master its basics, which amazed Kakashi to no end. Of course, his kanji would take years to be of any actual use, the boy was not the sharpest blade of grass after all, but the speed at which he picked up hiragana and katakana was astounding. The calligraphy set seemed to be doing him, as well as the daily meditation, wonders. Naruto was definitely much calmer than the week of the Uchiha incident, and it seemingly wouldn't be going away anytime soon. Naruto also had been reading the scrolls that they had been able to get open. Some of them contained fuinjutsu that Kakashi could neither make heads nor tails of. Thus they were relegated to the scrolls they could open at the moment, which mainly included clan culture, history, and ninja basics, along with a few Fuinjutsu 101. Kakashi had also been having Naruto attempt Shuriken Jutsu and other things related to the subject. That study had not been going particularly well. Speaking of which, Kakashi left his musing to view Naruto, who was attempting to hit an abandoned training pole that they had come across. Naruto had complained about the stuffiness of the safe house, and quite frankly, Kakashi had agreed. Thus he decided to take Naruto out to one of the training grounds for the day. With a grunt, Naruto hurled a kunai towards the direction of the pole that passed over it by a good few feet. He had been at it for about an hour and had missed the majority of his throws. The ones he had managed to land bounced off due to insufficient power on Naruto's fault. Kakashi had wanted to show Naruto how to use the weapons, but Naruto had insisted that he could do it perfectly fine on his own. Instead of going ahead and helping him, Kakashi decided to let Naruto try it himself. As depressing as it was to watch, Kakashi had to admit that the kid had grit, even if it was only due to wanting to save face, a quality that would help Naruto greatly in the future. At this last failure, Naruto grunted and stomped over to the shade of a tree and sat down, sulking. Kakashi walked over with an eyebrow cocked. "Are you ready to let me teach you?" Naruto gave him an annoyed glare and then looked away in embarrassment. "Sure." Kakashi, at that moment, was struck by how much he looked, how much he seemed like a Beto. Turning his attention back to the moment, he pulled a kunai from out of his pouch and deftly threw it with just a flick of the wrist. It sank into the pole with a loud thunk and remained embedded in it. Kakashi turned back to Naruto and explained, "You're using your forearm and shoulder too much. The main thing that should be moving when you throw kunai is your wrist. Also, take off the bandana. It'll mess with your depth perception." Kakashi pulled out another kunai. This time, he used Naruto's method of throwing it. As it had with Naruto, it went wildly over the top and lay in the dirt some 7 feet wide of the tree. Kakashi pulled out one last kunai and handed it to Naruto. He hesitantly took it, pulled off his bandana covering the Sharingan, walked closer to the pole, and threw it, attempting to mimic Kakashi's movement. It sailed through the air and hit the pole, though with less grace and power than Kakashi's. But it didn't matter to Naruto. He had hit it. He let out a whoop of victory and twirled around to face Kakashi. "Hell yeah. Did you see that?" Kakashi chuckled, "I sure did, Naruto. That was much better." The kid practically glowed from the praise, his smile growing even wider. "Go collect your kunai. Try practicing for a few minutes more." Naruto nodded fervently and ran over to the pole, intent on picking up the kunai that had accumulated over the past few minutes. "It's impressive how easily he understood what I did," Kakashi mused. From observation, Naruto seemed like, for all intents and purposes, a complete moron. Perhaps it could be a function of his age, he was 6 after all, or maybe he had never really cared to learn anything before. Whatever the case may be, Kakashi didn't expect him to throw it nearly as well as he did. Kakashi turned back to Naruto, who was still collecting the thrown kunai. As he watched him, Kakashi remembered he had to meet with his team on what was going on. It was bad enough that he had left them high and dry after the Uchiha massacre, especially since Itachi was in his squad. It was another thing entirely to leave them out of the loop for so long. Yamato was going to be pissed, of that much, he was certain. A few hours later. Kakashi entered the bar. It wasn't the nicest of places, but it had a hominess to it, with its dark interior and low ceiling. Around him, civilians and shinobi alike reveled, drank, and sang as he walked through the bar, all the way to the back. In a large curved booth in the back right corner of the bar sat his team. They were in a sorry state, from what Kakashi could tell. Yuago had bags under her eyes and had a faraway look in her eyes. Yamato looked relatively collected as usual, but he was looking at the pint he had clutched in his hand in a way that Kakashi didn't like the looks of, and the fact that the rest of them hadn't shown up didn't bode well. Of course, Itachi was gone, but the others should be there as well. They perked up as they saw him come over. Kakashi stood in front of the table. "You two look like shit," Kakashi stated bluntly. Yamato snorted while Yuago looked indignant. "With all due respect, Captain, it's been a pretty shitty few weeks," she replied. Kakashi looked around. "There's only two of you here. Where is Sugaru?" This time Yuago answered him, "Dead." He turned sharply to her. "What?" She shrugged despondently. "Apparently, he tried to pursue Itachi. All that we recovered of him was a pile of ashes." Kakashi pinched the bridge of his nose in silent contemplation. Itachi had killed one of his squad. What the hell was he supposed to feel? On the one hand, he was incensed that he had killed one of their own. On the other, what was he supposed to do? Itachi had to keep an image up, and that was one of a ruthless killer. This was such horseshit. Unaware of his inner conflict, his teammate stayed silent in quiet respect for the fallen Anbu member. Finally, Kakashi spoke again. "Anko? Resigned yesterday," Yamato sighed. He moved over. "Sit down, Captain, please," he asked in an almost pleading manner. Kakashi slid into the booth, wondered how things had gone to shit so quickly, and while he was off mission no less. "What else has happened?" Yamato was staring at his beer once again as he spoke. "We've been on high alert ever since it happened. Multiple Kumo Anbu squads have tried to probe the village limits. We took care of those bastards. A few Ryu shinobi attempted to take hostages at the hospital. They were killed, but the team doing an investigation on them has reason to believe that they were somehow related to Iowa." Yamato sighed again. "It seems like every other major village is just trying to cause another mess for us to deal with." "No doubt they're trying to test how weakened we've become," Yuago supplied. Yamato grunted in agreement. "I wonder what the Hokage's reaction to all of it will be. Hopefully, it will be better than the response to the whole Hyuga incident." Silence reigned at the table as the trio listened to the other patrons of the bar and watched the wax and wane of the various crowds dancing in various places. Kakashi's thoughts drifted back to Naruto and how much he reminded him of Obito. It was a comforting and chilling realization how self-sacrificial he could potentially be. The last thing he wanted was for his little brother to end up like him. Yet, was it an inevitability? Yuago snapped him from his thoughts. "So, Captain, we haven't seen you since the night it happened. Where the hell have you been?" Kakashi sighed and figured that he had to tell them now. Hiruzen had given him the go-ahead to tell them about his training of Naruto. Though not of the Sharingan, much to Kakashi's chagrin. He didn't like lying to his team, and they were the closest thing he had to a family at the moment. "Hokage-sama ordered me to begin training the Jinchuriki. He believes that his training will be paramount to the safety of the village from here on out, since the Uchiha are all but wiped out." Yuago stared out across the bar. "Poor kid," she murmured. "Still, it could beat being a lonely orphan, but I doubt it." Kakashi murmured in agreement. Silence fell once more until Yamato said. "I just don't get it." He slammed the pint on the table, sloshing beer on his hand. Why the hell did he do it? Yuago and Kakashi needed no elaboration on who Yamato was talking about, and Kakashi was willing to bet that Yuago was thinking the same thing. "From what I've heard from some of the higher-ups, he hated his clan, the missions probably got to him, and the rest is history," Kakashi droned in an almost recitation-like cadence. Yuago narrowed his eyes at him, suspicious. After a moment, "That doesn't seem right," she declared. "If he had hated his clan, we would have seen it, and if he really was becoming too stressed, he would have taken it off. Itachi was smart enough to know his limits." Kakashi closed his eyes and internally sighed. His teammates really were too smart for their own good. "Listen, I can't give you the details, but there was a method to his madness." He got up to leave, but Yuago grabbed his shirt. "Where would be a good place to start looking?" Kakashi looked over his shoulder, viewing his expectant teammates' faces. After a moment's silence, he spoke. "Shisui's death was pretty unusual, wasn't it?" Kakashi turned around and left the bar, leaving his two disconcerted squadmates behind. The next day. The general hustle and bustle of the village was slowly returning to the Hidden Leaf. All around Kakashi were civilians going about their daily business, merchants selling their wares, cooks giving food, and shop owners restocking goods. Though it seemed like things were returning to normal, Kakashi could sense the general unease among the populace, like a blanket of anxiety, had fallen onto the village. It didn't help that the Chunin were still very much conspicuous to the civilians, who only seemed to heighten the tension. Kakashi was heading to the Hokage Tower for a report. He had given the day off to Naruto after he had given him another few hours to practice Shuriken Jutsu that morning. Kakashi was still baffled by how well he had improved with a little bit of guidance. Either that Sharingan really was a game changer or Naruto was some sort of genius. Well, it would be nice to think it was the latter, he was banking on the former. Kakashi walked into the Hokage's office in a nonchalant manner. The Hokage was sitting at his desk, sifting through paperwork as he walked into the room. He looked and smiled warmly at the young man. He seemed to be doing better than he had in months. "Ah, Kakashi. Just the man I wanted to see, tell me, how is your young charge?" The Haddock was taken aback by the brightness in his voice. Nevertheless, he answered his superior. "Very well, Hokage-sama, he has been advancing at the pace I predicted he would, albeit with an aptitude I was not expecting from him." Hiruzen sighed, and his face lost some of its brightness though a soft, sad smile lingered on his face. His parents would be so proud of him. "Their opinion of us would be a completely different matter," Kakashi replied sardonically. The pair shared a laugh at their own expense. As their chuckles died down, Hiruzen asked the shinobi, "Tell me, Kakashi, what do you think will be my legacy?" Now Kakashi was definitely worried. "Hokage-sama, what exactly are you asking me?" The Hokage waved a hand derisively in front of him, clearing the pipe smoke wreathed around him. "I know my decisions haven't been popular these last few years, especially in regards to the Hyuga incident. Do you think I have done what was right for Konoha?" Kakashi pondered the question. He had never really given it much thought. To him, it was what it was, nothing more, nothing less. Finally, after a minute's silence, he answered. "I don't think you have made the best decisions in every situation, including major ones. But I could never doubt the sincerity of your actions were intended for the good of Konoha." The answer for the shinobi was silence. Kakashi saw the aged Hokage stare past him with a faraway look in his eyes. Then he stood up and turned to look out the window, viewing nearly all the village. "May I ask you why you asked me such a question?" The Hokage sighed, never once turning his visage away from the village. "I'm getting old, Kakashi. Soon I will either die or pass the torch on to a younger man. I suppose when you get to my age, you start to ponder what you've accomplished now that nearly everything is behind you. You start to wonder what you could have done differently." At this, he looked back at Kakashi with a fierce, determined look. "And what can still be done?" "And what does that mean?" Kakashi shot back suspiciously. "It means that there will be a complete overhaul of the shinobi system, starting next year, the headmaster of the academy will be Danzo." Kakashi was stunned by the declaration made by the Hokage. But Hokage, surely you can't be serious." Hiruzen laughed out loud at that. "You're the third person to have said that to me, Kakashi, and yes, I'm being completely serious." "But why? Surely the academy system hasn't degenerated so badly that we need Danzo Shimura, the Warhawk, has it? On the contrary, I think that perhaps our entire system might have completely degraded." The Hokage marched over to his desk and filed through the papers, finally handing Kakashi two of them. "Those are both final test papers. One of them is dated from being under the reign of the second Hokage, the other from 5 years ago." Kakashi looked at the one from the reign of Tobirama. It seemed that he had gotten straight marks on nearly everything, yet his basic Shuriken Jutsu and his Taijutsu combat had been subpar, making him fail the test. Though it looked like he had rescheduled another test 6 months afterward, passing the test. He then looked at the other one. This student had apparently gotten high marks on both ninjutsu and jinjutsu, along with acing the written test. However, he had abysmal chakra reserves, along with terrible taijutsu. But to Kakashi's shock, they had passed, and with being in the top half of the class no less. "What the hell?" he murmured to himself. He looked up at the Hokage, who smiled fiercely. "That is why I am putting Danzo in charge of the school," Hiruzen said, aggressively pointing a finger at the offending piece of paper in Kakashi's hand. He continued. "It seems that under my nose, the academy has become too focused on producing geniuses in a single field rather than working on getting the basics down to a T. I remember the quality of shinobi back in my prime, and to think that it's fallen so low under my watch." He sighed. "Kakashi, we must fix this, or it will be our downfall, mark my words." "What do you think will be the reaction to this?" Kakashi asked. "Well," Hiruzen took a puff from his pipe, "I think the shinobi forces will be overall pleased with it. I don't believe any qualms will be made by the wealthy merchant families residing in the Land of Fire, neither will any of the nobles." Hiruzen snorted. "It's not like there's much to be gained, financially that is, from being a shinobi, other than perhaps clan status." Kakashi nodded in agreement. And what of the general shinobi population? They'll be left alone for now. The first thing to take care of is the next generation. The Hokage nodded and moved back, sitting down in his chair with a grunt. One last thing, Hokage-sama, 3 of my squad are gone. What'll be done about them? The Hokage shuffled through his papers. I'll take care of it, my boy, if that is all, you are free to leave. Kakashi left, and Hiruzen was left to manage Kakashi's team. Very soon, he was able to narrow it down to a few people. Finally, he was able to decide. He would leave a spot out for Naruto. He was due to join the squad in a year, but the remaining he would fill with a Hyuga who had recently joined the Anbu, and Hiruzen tried to stifle his laughter as he decided on the next member. Just because I'm an old geezer doesn't mean I don't get to have any fun. He chuckled to himself. The hidden Anbu in the corner started to sweat in fear as he worried about what his superior was doing. Back at the safe house. Though it had only been 2 weeks since he had started studying how to read, it had become quite apparent to even Naruto himself that he was well on his way to being totally proficient at reading hiragana. As such, Naruto was lounging on the couch, loosely looking through one of the Uzumaki scrolls, specifically at the one primarily on Fuinjutsu. The truth about the secret to our ability to utilize Fuinjutsu so well comes in the form of our blood. Due to the concentration of yang chakra in our bodies, it manifests itself in physical form in the bloodstream. This causes it to be highly reactive to chakra and susceptible to disturbances in chakra, as well as being able to receive large amounts of chakra input if needed. It also means that no one other than Uzumaki can use Uzumaki Fuinjutsu because it only reacts to our chakra. The other piece of information, the fact that we can learn Fuinjutsu at such a quick pace, is a much harder thing to explain. To understand this, one must look at much theology and the order of heaven and its relation to man. There is a collective unconscious to mankind. It lives all the gods and demons, the heroes and villains, and even the divine itself. A few have theorized that the Uzumaki perhaps have another collective unconscious built upon their original one, tying them irrevocably to their family. This phenomenon is not only seen in the Uzumaki, but also the Uchiha and their so-called curse of hatred. The deep love and passion that Uchiha feel, especially towards their kinsmen, should not be possible on a clan-wide scale, even if their culture promoted it and held it as the highest good. According to the theory, this must also be a collective unconscious that is entirely foreign to the rest of humanity. What the hell does half of this even mean? Naruto muttered dismissively. He could read it perfectly fine. It was the content that confused him. Still, the part about the blood interested him since. Theoretically, he could do it right now. After thinking about it for a second, he got up and walked over to the table, on it sat his calligraphy set. Pulling it open, he grabbed the ink out of it. Naruto pulled out a kunai and cut open his palm. Well, here goes nothing, he took a deep breath and let his blood drip into the ink. Nothing happened, which disappointed Naruto, but he wasn't sure what he was expecting to happen anyways. Shrugging, he went to the sink to clean his wound. It was a shallow slice, so it wouldn't take too long to heal. Still, Kakashi would probably notice. Oh well, he might as well continue with his experiment. Moving back to the table, he pulled a piece of paper from the set, along with a brush. Dipping the brush into the ink, he thought about a storage seal he had seen in the scroll earlier that day. It wasn't totally perfect, but after a few minutes, he was able to copy the seal relatively accurately from memory, barring a few streaks here and there. Naruto hesitantly pulsed chakra into his hand and pressed it against the seal. As soon as he pressed his hand against it, Naruto moved it away as quickly as possible. Several things happened at once. The first thing to happen was a loud bang. The second was a large cloud of smoke violently erupted from the seal and covered the room, and the third was a loud clatter as something fell to the floor. Coughing and waving his hands wildly, Naruto moved away from the table in a panic. When the smoke cleared, he looked back where the table was supposed to be. He found nothing but his calligraphy set on the floor along with the seal. He had sealed the table. As if things couldn't get any worse for the young boy, a familiar voice came from the doorway behind him. What the hell just happened? A very irate Kakashi Haddock said. Ah. Kakashi-sensei. I just was practicing my Shuriken jutsu in the house, and yeah. So why did the table just disappear? Well, it's cause the technique you showed me was so powerful that I blew it to pieces. Naruto was sweating at this point. I'm so screwed. Kakashi crossed his arms and sighed. Naruto, if you want to practice Fuinjutsu, you'll have to do it under constant supervision and help from a Fuinjutsu master. Naruto looked away in humiliation, staring at the calligraphy set. It's not like there's any of us left except me. He muttered. And besides, it's not like there are any Fuinjutsu masters left out there. Now don't be like that, Naruto, of course, there are Fuinjutsu masters out. No, there aren't, Naruto responded flatly. At least not Uzumaki masters, he pointed at the scroll lying on the couch. It said that only Uzumaki seals could be used by Uzumaki. And I'm all that's left. Who am I supposed to learn from? Kakashi's pose softened. After a moment's silence, he moved over to Naruto and enveloped him in a hug. I'm sorry they're gone, Naruto. Naruto stood still before melting into the hug. I didn't even know them, he whispered hoarsely. But it hurt so much, Kakashi-sensei. Kakashi patted the pained boy on the head, comforting him. We all deal with loss, Naruto, some of us from the day we can walk, some of us from the day we're born. All we can do is weather the storm, Naruto, and keep them in our hearts. To be a shinobi is to endure. Naruto stayed in Kakashi's hug for a few moments more before he moved back. Brushing a few stray tears from his eyes, he gave Kakashi a watery smile. Suddenly wanting to get out of the situation, Naruto hurriedly grabbed his calligraphy set off the floor and handed Kakashi the seal delicately. Can I try on sealing that later? Kakashi nodded as he placed it on the kitchen counter. Suddenly remembering his confusion with the scroll, he said to Kakashi. Hey, sensei. There was something weird I read in the scroll over there. You should try checking it out and seeing what it means. Kakashi moved to pick up a scroll as Naruto sat on the floor, looking through another scroll of the less dangerous variety. Though truth be told, he wasn't paying attention to his scroll as much as he was paying attention to Kakashi's reaction to the other one. Kakashi wasn't really surprised by most of it from what Naruto could tell, though after a few minutes of reading it, Kakashi raised his eyebrow and placed his hand on his chin. After that, he put the scroll away. Seemingly lost in thought, he sat on the couch for a few more minutes. Finally, he spoke. Do you mind if I take this specific scroll to the Hokage, Naruto? Surprised by the question, Naruto shrugged. Go ahead. He said. Kakashi nodded in thanks, rolled the scroll up, and put it in his pouch. He then sat a few minutes more on the couch before heading off to one of the rooms. I suggest you get some sleep. He called out behind him. We're going to start bright and early tomorrow since this was a half day. We can't afford to be slacking too much. Naruto grinned and saluted him. Of course, Kakashi-sama. Kakashi chuckled and headed off to bed just as Naruto got up and started to head to his room. Chapter 5. In Naruto's opinion, the last 9 months had been the hardest in his short life. Of course, he hadn't been through a lot. There was the time he ran away from the orphanage for a few days. But between losing his eye, dealing with a slave driver known as Kakashi Haddock, he didn't want to admit to that bastard that he had grown on Naruto, and being generally on the clock every day of the week, it definitely took the cake for most challenging point in his life so far. His thoughts were broken by a punch aimed for his face, which he ducked under and lunged with a fist of his own that Kakashi promptly grabbed, and Naruto was thrown right over the tall scarecrow's head. He would have landed on his face and probably broken his nose if he hadn't switched with a shadow clone hiding in the trees. As soon as his feet landed on the tree branch, he flung a kunai with an explosive tag towards Kakashi. With the sound of explosion covering him, he switched again with a clone on the other side of the clearing and ran in the opposite direction of his opponent, intent on retreating and regrouping to think of a plan. Damn it. How could I have been so careless? He had let himself lose focus, and that's why he was currently on the defense. Suddenly Kakashi's voice rang out in his head. Excellent, Naruto, but still not good enough. Genjutsu? Naruto realized. He brought his hands together, molded his chakra, and then released it with a loud kai. The illusion shimmered away, just in time for him to see that he was back in the clearing with 4 clones of Kakashi, charging him from all sides, kunai raised. At the start, he drew the wakizashi that Kakashi had gifted him and cut through the wrist of the one to his right, dispelling it. Sweat dripped down his face and into his eyes, making them sting. Naruto ducked under the one to his left and drove the wakizashi through where a man's heart would be. It was just a target. He turned back to the 2 remaining clones who had jumped back when he retaliated and were now cautiously stalking him. Finally, one of them lunged, Naruto grabbed his hand and stuck an explosive seal on his forearm, and with a heave, he kicked with all his might and pushed him back to where his comrade was. Naruto backpedaled from the blast, making sure that no debris hit him. When the explosion hit, one final clone jumped out of the smoke, recklessly charging him. Naruto drove the wakizashi into his neck. Suddenly the clone shimmered out and a bolt of electricity shot up his arm. Screaming, Naruto dropped his short sword. All of a sudden, he felt his feet being grabbed by someone's hands, and in an instant, he was underground with only his head poking out of the dirt. The real Kakashi walked out of the tree line and casually strolled up to Naruto, reading his infuriating porn. That was such an obvious trap. He half mused, half scolded, without taking an eye off his book. Hasn't your dear old sensei taught you better? Naruto wriggled, pretending to look angry as he bided his time, waiting for a clone to get into position. Screw you, Kakashi. That was unfair. Naruto, don't you know that doesn't exist in our line of work? Suddenly Naruto's face changed from angry to darkly amused. Yeah, I know. Suddenly a hissing was heard by both of them and an explosion emanated from his body. Nearby Naruto chuckled softly behind a bush. Nice try, jackass. Suddenly his feet were snagged by a wire and his body was pulled upside down. Kakashi once again appeared from nowhere. Very, very good, Naruto. Twirling a kunai on his index finger. But I still lost. He pouted. True, but I'm one of the best ninja in the village, Naruto. You won't be beating me for a while, kid. Naruto crossed his arms and looked away. It was a somewhat childish gesture that was only exacerbated by his predicament. Kakashi snorted softly. Besides, I still haven't told you that you passed. Naruto turned sharply back at him, eyes filled with hope and uncertainty. What? He all but shouted. Congratulations. You passed. Kakashi smiled and made a peace sign. Does that mean? Yes, it does. Hell yeah. Naruto shouted at the top of his lungs as he celebrated. Kakashi pinched his ear. Hey. We're still on public training ground. You want me to put the seal back on your tongue? Naruto blanched. Kakashi had used a seal that made Naruto unable to speak for a few weeks to force him to learn the Anbu sign language. It worked, but it was one of the most annoying things Naruto had had to deal with while training. That's what I thought, Kakashi said as he cut Naruto down. Once he was right side up once more, Naruto turned to Kakashi and beamed. So when do I start? The scarecrow ruffled the blonde's hair. I'll fill in the Hokage and we'll see when it comes through. Kakashi cocked his head. Are you sure you're ready? Suddenly Naruto's guts started to churn. He looked away. I don't really know. He confessed. This is my first experience as a ninja and I don't know what to expect. If you want, we circa. Naruto held up a hand to stop him. I'll do it, Kakashi, I've come too far to stop now. He said. Kakashi looked at him with an unreadable expression for a second but shrugged after a moment. Suit yourself. But as Kakashi walked away, Naruto's face became uncertain. A few hours later, the Hokage's office. The shuffle of papers was all that could be heard as two elderly men sat at opposite sides of the table. One judge, the other, the accused. The aged Hokage breathed out pipe smoke through his nose as he rubbed his temples. After a second, he opened his eyes and glared at the man facing him. You're certain that this is all of them? He queried. Without a doubt, that is all of them, Danzo replied. Hiruzen pinched the bridge of his nose and closed his eyes. I had my suspicions, but I never thought that you had gone this far. Without missing a beat, Danzo replied. The only defense I can fairly give myself is that I've done everything for the sake of this village. For a second, he looked down, seemingly in shame. That was the vow I made to myself that last mission with Tobirama-sensei. At last, Hiruzen opened his eyes once more to look at the man across the table. Why haven't you raided his bases yet? 2 reasons, Danzo said. 1, it would require a large force along with especially skilled shinobi. 2, Orochimaru is a slippery bastard and he has dozens of hideouts. It would be hard to pinpoint his exact location and, in the event of his escape, he would probably rather liquidate them all. Rather than risk being found again. After replying, he reached over, picked up a stack of papers on Hiruzen's desk and handed them to the old Hokage. This is the list of his experiments that are known to me. Though I doubt it's complete by any stretch of the imagination. Hiruzen leafed through them, shuddering at some of them, suddenly he stopped on one and glared at Danzo again. This time, it was a much harsher glare. Show it to me. Danzo's face was stone cold as he unwrapped the bandages on his right arm. Underneath was not normal human skin, but a sickly gray arm wrinkled and covered in scars. That, stated Hiruzen. According to this report, is the right arm of Uchiha. That is correct. Hiruzen slammed his fist on the table. Why in the sage's name did you think that was a suitable thing to do? It was a medical experiment primarily. I lost my arm during an assassination attempt and it was an option presented to me. If we could acquire the information to perform operations such as my right arm, it would be a great boon to both the medical corps and the general shinobi within Konoha. Think about it, Hiruzen, how many shinobi have to retire due to being maimed or missing limbs? That operation was done with another man's arm. Orochimaru made it apparent that he had perfected the technique. Even if we got a hold of the data, and that's a big if, we'd have no idea how to perform such an operation. Tsunade's been gone for years and I doubt she'll be returning anytime soon. Danzo suddenly smirked and leaned back in his chair, crossing his legs. Come now, Hiruzen, you're the one who's always saying to place our faith in the next generation. The aged Hokage's eye twitched, incensed to have his own words thrown back at him. Before he could give an irate reply, Danzo sighed. Please at least think on it, Hiruzen. It could be a serious leg up over our enemies. Hiruzen's face turned from annoyance to shock in a matter of seconds. After a pause, he cleared his throat and nodded. Of course I will, but I make no promises. Danzo bowed his head in gratitude. If that is all, I believe you are free to leave. Danzo looked up. His stoic mask once more covered his face. "There's one more thing." Hiruzen narrowed his eyes, seemingly mentally preparing himself for whatever the Warhawk would reveal. "I have reason to believe that Orochimaru has been trying to infiltrate Uchiha Island." Hiruzen took his pipe out of his mouth and leaned over the table, scrutinizing Danzo. "You're certain of this?" he half asked, half stated. "I have no definitive proof. However, a few of my agents tailed some of his men appearing and disappearing in the area." Hiruzen leaned back in his seat, satisfied. "Well, if he is snooping around there, he won't get far. The Uzumaki were not called seal masters for nothing after all. Besides, after the fall, there have been rumors of bands of them still roaming the island." Danzo nodded. "If that is all, I will take my leave." "One more thing actually," Hiruzen interjected. "I know that your spy network is much more connected to Yakuza and organized crime. If at all possible, I would like to explore the idea of being able to merge yours with Jiraiya's." Danzo nodded once more. "I'll see what I can do." With that, he got up and left. Hiruzen leaned back in his chair and turned the seat so he could see the monuments. After a few minutes of daydreaming, Kakashi walked through the door. "Ah, Kakashi, how are you?" the Hokage greeted. "I'm doing well, Hokage-sama, though I must confess that I feel a little rusty just doing surveillance missions for the past few months. Things have quieted down around here." "Indeed they have, and thank goodness for that," Hiruzen replied. "I saw Danzo leaving the building. Anything I should be aware of?" The warmth in Hiruzen's eyes dimmed a little, but he said. "It's nothing for now." Kakashi didn't look convinced, but nodded in understanding nevertheless. After a moment's pause, he suddenly said, "I think Naruto's ready." Hiruzen's face turned stern. "Are you sure?" "He will be as ready as he'll ever be, Hokage-sama, that I am sure of." For what felt like the millionth time today, Hiruzen sighed. "I trust your judgment, Kakashi. I'll work through the paperwork in the coming days. In the meantime, pick up his equipment from the supply depot." "Will he be able to go through the ceremony?" Hiruzen nodded. "If that's all, I'll leave," Kakashi stated. "Kakashi, do you think it was a mistake to forgive Danzo?" He thought for a second and then replied, "I'm not sure, Hokage-sama." The old man shuffled through the report and handed the sheet containing the information on Danzo's right arm. After reading it for a second, Kakashi looked up, alarmed. "Before you ask, yes, I just verified it." "Why the hell would he do that in the first place?" Kakashi nearly shouted. "I don't know, Kakashi, but he claimed that Orochimaru had perfected the technique and that the information would prove extremely valuable to us. He claimed that his arm was a good test run for it." Silence claimed the room as Kakashi stood, processing the information. After a few seconds, Hiruzen spoke. "After Naruto's initiation ceremony, I will have another mission for you." He pulled out the map of the 5 nations, dots littering the map. "I want you to go to each of the ones in fire territory and perform reconnaissance. I want to know every damn detail about those bases." Kakashi snapped to attention. "Yes, Hokage-sama." "You're dismissed." With that, Kakashi left Hiruzen to daydream once more. A few hours later. Naruto stood outside of his apartment that he hadn't seen in many months. Ever since the massacre, he had been living with Kakashi in the safe house. Well, it had gotten better after he had painted the walls thanks to his sensei. Naruto had missed being able to wake up and see the Hokage monument in the mornings. Seeing the faces carved into the cliff always calmed him for some odd reason. Whenever he felt sad or troubled, he would turn to those faces and his worries would somewhat die away. Perhaps seeing it was motivating, or perhaps those monuments represented the promise of glory and greatness to him. Naruto didn't really know. Perhaps he would never know. Shaking the thoughts from his head, Naruto fished the key out of his pocket and unlocked his apartment. Inside he found it had been impeccably maintained and cleaned in his 9-month absence. Quite frankly, it was probably the cleanest Naruto had ever seen it be. The floors were clean, the bed was made, and the windows weren't covered in a thick layer of dust. Opening the fridge, Naruto found that it was filled with fresh groceries. In a panic, he checked his cupboards only to find a note that read, "Eat some real fucking food." Which Naruto promptly crushed into a bowl and, opening the window, threw it with all his might. With his rage satisfied, for now, he moved to the study room that he had used as storage for the random things he picked up. In it, he found that all of his stuff had been cleared away and in its place were various scrolls and books, seemingly all on the subject of training. On the wall hung a fully sized Anbu standard Chukodo. It was a shame because it would be a few years before he could use one of those correctly. As he returned to the main room, he rooted through his fridge once again to search for something to make a quick lunch. It was nearly 1 in the afternoon and Naruto had only had a small breakfast. He usually ended up throwing it up if he was going to spar that day, so he opted for lighter breakfasts generally. Inside he found some chicken stock and some ginger and green onions. Thinking quickly, he searched through his cupboard once more and came upon a bag of rice. In a few minutes, he had a pot of rice porridge cooking on the stove. As he waited for his lunch to finish cooking, Naruto's body was inevitably turned to the window, gazing out at those solemn faces carved into the cliff, those faces that had been a balm upon Naruto's suffering for as long as he lived. It was in moments like this that Naruto fully understood Kakashi's explanation of the will of fire. The window had been left open, and an early autumn breeze swept through the room, sending shivers down his spine. The rattle of the pot broke him from his thoughts as he turned the burner off and waited for the porridge to cool. The goosebumps had subsided along with his understanding. Naruto hoped he could experience it again sometime soon. Soon enough, his food cooled down, and he sat down to eat. Halfway through his meal, he realized with a start that he had not visited Ichiraku since his disappearance. With a guilty conscience, he made it a point to eat there sometime soon. He hoped that he hadn't worried the old man and AM. In the meantime, Naruto wanted to go someplace to think. There were few places that Naruto could genuinely be in his element. When he was sparring was one of them, another was standing on the Hokage monument. The one other place was in the Forest of Death. He had first come here as a training exercise, obviously, but on the off chance that he had gotten free time, he likely spent it in the forest. The lack of humans and the ability to do practically anything he wanted was appealing to him. If he wanted to jump through the trees for hours on end, fine. If he wanted to spend time hunting down large animals and fight them, why the hell not? If he just wanted to meditate and listen to the sounds of nature, he was perfectly free to do so. Thus Naruto found himself inexorably drawn to the forest just as he was on this occasion. He leaned over a pond and looked at his reflection. Naruto slowly traced the scar running down his face. Sighing, he sat down near the water's edge and closed his eyes, taking in the forest. He was nervous, that much he knew. Whatever was in store for him after he joined the Anbu. Kakashi had made it very apparent that their line of work was not pretty: assassinations, torture, seduction, and other things that made Naruto shudder. Was he ready? Was this what he was supposed to do? Maybe Itachi was right. He was just a kid, after all. Naruto wasn't sure if he was cut out for th. "Hey, brat." A voice called. His uncertain thoughts were broken as he looked around to see where the voice came from. All he found were trees and brush. "Who's there?" he called out. A maniacal cackle was all that followed his question. Suddenly he felt a finger tap his shoulder. Whirled around, he looked up into the face of a konoha shinobi. She was wearing a long tan overcoat over a fishnet shirt and shorts, her hair was violet and her eyes were light brown. As he turned around, she gave him a sadistic grin. "So kiddo, wanna tell me what you're doing in a restricted area like this?" Naruto calmed himself from the initial shock of her appearance. Regaining his composure, he replied, "That's none of your business, ma'am." "Ooh. Ma'am, I do like the sound of that." She taunted, "You have such good manners. I wonder who taught you that." She was starting to get on Naruto's nerves. He had come out here to get away from people, and this woman was ruining his peace of mind. "But," she continued in a sing-song voice, "you still haven't told me why you're out here, kid." Naruto gritted his teeth and returned, "Why are you out here? The only reason I'm in this forest is to get away from people. This place is a death trap to most." To most, that is correct," she continued in a husky tone. "But," she said as a snake crawled out of her overcoat and onto her neck, "I am not most." Naruto's eyes widened at the sight of the snake, making the strange woman grin with glee. "I'm guessing you ain't most either, kiddo," she said after a moment's pause. "Judging by that scar and that eye." The blonde internally cursed at his carelessness. Naruto was only allowed to remove the eye patch at home, and at training, he had only taken it off in the forest to see it in the pond. Well, there was no point in being secretive anymore. He turned away in annoyance, focusing his gaze back on the pond. "Finally," he said. "I came out here to think." "Odd place to come think, don't you think?" Naruto ignored the pun and turned back to her. "It's a place away from other people, so in my mind, it's the perfect place to think." Her body language seemed to soften at that statement. After a moment, she looked up into the canopy of the forest. "Well, next time you want to come in here, ask me, kiddo. It's my forest, after all." Naruto quirked an eyebrow at her, "Pretty sure this is public property, restricted public property, but I digress." Yeah, but the Hokage lets me come out here whenever I want because it's my forest." "Does he let you do that?" Suddenly regaining her impish tone. Naruto rolled his eyes and responded, "No, he does not." She dramatically pointed her finger at him. "Exactly. Look, if I agree to ask to come in next time, will you leave me alone?" "No, but thanks for agreeing." "Ugh, what? Fine, whatever." Naruto stomped back over to the pond and sat down beside it, facing away from the woman. She was undeterred and walked up beside Naruto. "What the hell's got you in such a tizzy anyways, kiddo?" "You wouldn't understand," he replied. "Come on, don't be a prick. You're gonna have to communicate better than that when you're in the Anbu after all, might as well start practicing now." Naruto's head whirled around to face her. She was absent-mindedly filing her fingernails with a kunai. "So you know who I am?" "Yeah, kiddo. Why didn't you tell me?" "What the hell kind of way would that be for me to introduce myself?" "Hi. The name's Mitarashi Anko. I know that you're gonna be going into the Anbu soon and that you're the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. What's your name? And you still haven't answered the question." Naruto turned back to looking at the pond. "I was wondering if I really am cut out for it." He confessed, "Whether this is the right thing for me to be doing." "Well, that is quite the dilemma. Say, I like you, kiddo. You mind if I give you some friendly advice?" Naruto shrugged. "Sure. You won't know whether it is the right thing to do until you're calm, at peace, centered. That sounds like a bullshit platitude, I know, but trust me, kiddo, if I had known that piece of info at your age, it could have saved me a lot of trouble." Naruto, by this point, had stood up again and turned to face her, her words touching him. "Where did you hear that?" he asked, somewhat stunned. "That old wrinkly coot the Hokage a few years back. It was just after I had gotten back she stopped." Her face suddenly went blank and her eyes seemed to stare past Naruto. After a split second, she came back to herself, though she appeared rather solemn this time. "Never mind," she finished. The silence followed her statement. After a few seconds, Naruto spoke up. "Thank you, by the way," he said. "I know it seems stupid, beauty, thank you." "Hey, don't mention it, kiddo," she replied, regaining her previous confidence. Naruto chuckled at her. "Whatever, Na-chan. Don't call me that. It makes me feel old." Naruto laughed out loud this time. It was a good laugh, one that came from the soul as well as the belly. "I bet you are old, Na-chan. How old are you?" 30. 35. "Why, you little bastard." She lunged at him. A few days later, in a secluded place in Konoha. The building was completely silent other than the crackle of a raging bonfire. Despite the many shinobi in the building, they all seemed mute as they looked upon Naruto. The fire reflected off their masks, making the whole ordeal much eerier. "Uzumaki Naruto." A voice called out to him. Suddenly a man appeared in front of him. His mask was blank and he seemed to be some sort of judgmental god. Naruto suddenly felt very small under his shadow. "You wish to join our Brotherhood of the Darkness?" The man's voice boomed. His voice seemed to rattle Naruto's bones. "Why yes." Naruto managed out. "You wish to fight and die in the darkness so that the shinobi of Konoha may die a more glorious death than we?" Suddenly his courage returned and he was able to answer more confidently, "Yes." The man crossed his arms and grunted in contempt. "Very well, Uzumaki Naruto, but first, we will see if you are even worthy of our brotherhood." He stepped aside and pointed through the bonfire. "Walk through it, boy." Naruto's heart was in his throat as he heard the man's order. His doubts came back tenfold, threatening to overwhelm the boy. He should run. He should leave this place and never come back. However, all of a sudden, Anko's words came back to him. "You won't know whether it is the right thing to do until you're calm, at peace, centered." With that, he took a deep breath and tried to calm himself. After a few breaths, his mind was empty. Finally, he asked himself, "What should I do?" An infinitely small voice in his head answered him. "Walk through the fire." With trembling feet and tears threatening to spill down his cheeks, he stepped into the flames. It hurt, it hurt, it hurt so much. His nerves stung with unending agony as his clothes caught fire. He closed his eyes and sobbed, but he kept moving forward through the fire. The soles of his feet burned beyond any comprehension. With a wail, he passed out the fire and onto the cold ground on the other. Whimpering, he curled up into a ball and opened his eyes, contemplating his position. "Stand," the voice said. Despite his aching nerves, Naruto slowly made it to his feet. Suddenly he realized that his clothes had been completely burned off in the fire and that he had no burns whatsoever. The man with the blank mask handed a pair of standard issue pants and shirt. After Naruto put it on, the man extended his hand again. This time he was holding a fox mask in his outstretched hand. Suddenly the man's voice boomed out once more. "The boy known as Uzumaki Naruto died in that fire behind you. Your name from now on is Kitsune. Brothers. Sisters. Welcome your new brother." The one silent Anbu agent suddenly chanted as one, "Kitsune, Kitsune, 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 Kitsune." Naruto slowly took the mask from the man's outstretched hand. "Kitsune, Kitsune, 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 Kitsune." At an agonizingly slow pace, he placed it on his head. "Kitsune, Kitsune, 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 Kitsune." And finally, he slipped it over his face. The Anbu members broke out into cheering and clapping. Naruto spied a female Anbu agent with violet hair. Imperceptibly she nodded approvingly to Naruto, who caught her gesture. His grin split his face in two, though his mask obscured it. He felt tired, his muscles ached, and his nerves were raw, but he had definitely made the right decision. "Woo." Another chapter is done. Thankfully this chapter has a lot more story points than the last few, which I apologize for, but frankly, I have no clue what I'm doing 3/4 of the time. On the topic of Danzo, I'm sorry but I love writing him and Hiruzen, which is probably why you see so much of them together, they're a perfect foil for each other. On Anko I was always planning on adding her to one of the main characters of this story, she always seemed like a character that was never taken to her fullest potential, but that's half the cast of Naruto anyways. Chapter 6. Next. A gruff voice called out at the front of the line. Naruto inwardly sighed to calm his nerves. It had been a few days since the initiation rite. Today was his first official day, and at the end of the line was the quartermaster with his standard issue gear and would tell him which squad Naruto was going to. From there, he would receive his orders from his captain. Next. The man called again, and Naruto found himself just barely looking over a desk at a man with a blank mask. In Konoha's Anbu, blank masks represented non-combat roles filled by those who couldn't perform missions but still wished to stay in the Anbu. The masked man looked at Naruto for a second, then shrugged and handed the boy his gear, along with a piece of paper. Room 4, locker 5. He grunted. Naruto nodded in thanks and left the line. I swear they're getting younger every damn year. He heard the quartermaster mutter. The HQ wasn't exactly what Naruto would have called an aesthetic experience. The walls were grey drab, and the only material that was present was concrete. Still, they served their purpose, Naruto mused. This was a barrack, after all, not a palace. Naruto pushed his thoughts away as he turned the doorknob to room 4 and paused as he saw the occupants turn from their lockers and conversations to look at him. The only recognizable one there was Anko. For a moment, no one said anything. Then Anko's face split in half with a grin and laughed. Hey, kiddo, so you got stuck with us? Naruto returned her grin with a warm smile. Well it depends, he drawled, teasing her. Is this your room, or did you just get lost and decide to molest the poor men here? The other shinobi snickered at his jibe. Quiet brat. Bonking him over the head with a soft karate chop. Just cause you're cute doesn't mean I won't beat your ass if you ask for it. Sorry, I'm not into that kinda thing, he shot back. Why you damn. Children, please, calm down. Naruto and Anko both looked at the door as Kakashi entered. He eyed the pair with an exasperated expression. Hey, it ain't my fault she's easy as hell to tease. Naruto protested. You're gonna get it, kid, if you don't shut the hell up. She growled. You wish Ni-chan. He returned, the squad guffawed and laughed at seeing the usually scary and intimidating woman get made fun of by a kid. Why you? By the sage, will you two shut the hell up? Kakashi borderline pleaded. The pair looked at Kakashi and stopped, sensing that they had just about reached his limit, at least for work. He sighed and shook his head. First, I get landed with this psycho, and now I get Naruto. This place isn't going to last a week. He sniffed. Naruto chuckled and turned to his locker that he had just been assigned minutes ago. It wasn't a pretty sight, the metal was worn and banged up and the dull green paint had been chipped away in places. However, he didn't mind and smiled, finally calling something in this place his. Before the mission, we'll need to get your Anbu seal on you first. Kakashi called from the other side of the room. Anbu seal? What for? What even is that? Naruto returned curiously. Kakashi pulled up his sleeve, revealing his red Anbu seal on his arm. It is used for communication in squads. Basically, you'll channel chakra through it and it'll allow you to communicate with the rest of the team. If the need arises, Hokage-sama can communicate through it as well. Naruto nodded in understanding. So, who's the seal master? Kakashi pointed to the other side of the room. He is. Naruto looked and saw Hyuga laying a calligraphy set on a folding table next to him, his headband marking him out as a branch member. His wide eyes zeroed in on Naruto and he motioned for Naruto to come over to him. Don't worry, Naruto, Shiryu is an expert with seals. He'll get the job done, Kakashi reassured him. Naruto shrugged and walked over to where Shiryu was sitting, his pale eyes never leaving Naruto's form. Remove your shirt. He said tonelessly. Despite being somewhat uncomfortable with the man's demeanor, Naruto nevertheless pulled his white t-shirt over his head and placed it on the table. Shiryu then pulled a kunai from his pocket and grabbed Naruto's hand, slicing it over his ink. Do not worry, Naruto-san, I merely require your blood for the seal to work, Shiryu murmured. Naruto nodded, though slightly taken aback by the sudden movement and winced at the pain, realized he wasn't trying to harm him. After a few seconds, he put his arm down again and Shiryu dabbed his tool in the bloody ink and started on his craft. After a few simple strokes with the brush, Shiryu was done and he moved back from the boy. Channel your chakra into it. He said. Naruto did just that and felt his mind expand somewhat. What the hell is this? He said in his head. Shut the hell up, brat. You're gonna give me a headache. The voice of Anko reverberated in his skull as he jumped in fright at the sound of her voice. Sorry. Naruto returned sheepishly. "You'll be able to hear us through this." Kakashi butted in. "And when the need arises, you'll be able to hear Hokage-sama as well." "This is pretty sweet," Naruto said out aloud. He turned to Shiryu, "Am I good to go?" Shiryu nodded. "Yes," he stated tonelessly. "Man, he kinda gives me the creeps." Naruto thought. He shivered as he walked back over to his locker. He cleared his head realizing that the rest of his new team was gearing up for a mission. He put on his equipment, got his armor on and placed his wakizashi on his waist. Naruto looked at his mask, admiring the design and meditating on it. Naruto gulped, keeping his nerves in check as he looked into its eyes. He would be lying if he said that he wasn't worried. In truth, he was terrified. What if something happened? What if he screwed up? Would he get kicked out? The foreign person placed a hand on his shoulder, which made him jump. Naruto spun his neck to the side, wincing at the whiplash, and saw that Kakashi had been the one to come up behind him. "I can't promise you that everything will be fine, but I can promise you that everyone in this team is here to back you up to the best of their ability. All we ask is that you do the same." Kakashi murmured. Naruto looked at him for a second and then nodded. He looked back at the mask one last time and pulled it over his head. "Alright, boss, where we going, what we doing?" An Anbu member that he wasn't familiar with piped up. Kakashi turned to face her. "Well, we've been on the patrol and security roster, so today it'll just be a routine patrol of the city. It should take us around 6 hours before the next shift gets in." Naruto widened his eyes behind the mask. 6 hours. Quite a long time. "We'll be taking border patrol today, so we'll be watching the gates and the walls for any suspicious activity and/or deal with threats. Taicho will be leaving with us. However, he is going on an extended mission, so I'm your commanding officer until he returns." Tenzo replied to Nico, taking control of the group. "Nothing too exciting, but since we've got a rookie today, it probably wouldn't hurt to have anything too extreme." Naruto was fine with that, at least for now. The darkness of the tunnels was somewhat comforting to Naruto once he got used to them. It was easy to keep calm when everything was one uniform color. Kakashi had set a brisk pace, but Naruto was able to keep up with him. The nearly silent pit-pat of his teammates' feet hitting the cold concrete was all that he could hear. The team came to a stop at the foot of a rebar ladder built into the concrete. Kakashi pointed at the ladder and pointed to Naruto. He was to climb first. Naruto inwardly shrugged and clambered up the ladder, wincing at being in the sunlight again after being in a tunnel for so long. The autumn breeze ruffled gently against him as he surveyed the surrounding area. The manhole opened up to a large forested area that was seemingly outside the walls of Konoha. Naruto had no time to reflect on his first time outside the walls, as his teammates were soon out of the hole as well. Kakashi pointed to the south. "You'll head near to the gate and perform surveillance on the travelers as they come and go. Make sure to stay hidden while you are on duty, Kitsune go with Owl." They all nodded and Naruto moved over to the Anbu with the owl mask as Inu disappeared into the trees, not to be seen for a while. He noticed that Owl seemed to be missing the eye holes on his mask. Naruto didn't pay any attention as he followed the silent member through the trees, nor did it occur to him that behind that mask was Shiryu. Once the masks were put on, it was business time and no one was anything more or less than their code names. After moving through the forest for a few minutes, Owl held his hand up, signaling to stop moving. Naruto peered ahead. A few dozen feet in front of them, they could see the road. Owl pointed up at the tree above them. Naruto nodded and walked up to the tree. After the pair had sufficiently hidden themselves among the tree, Naruto quietly whispered, "Do you have a good view of the road?" Owl silently nodded. Naruto turned to watch the road. The most annoying part about the whole mission wasn't actually the waiting. Kakashi had beaten patience into the boy early on. It was more that any stranger or person could be an enemy trying to get in, and there could be a chance that they could slip by. From the smallest child to the oldest man, from the poorest beggar to the most wealthy merchant, anyone could be a spy, shinobi, or terrorist. Of course, there were Chunin standing guard at the gate, but any spy worth their salt could get through them without much trouble, which was obviously why they were posted there. As such, Naruto and Owl kept their watch, closely monitoring the passers-by and the foreigners who entered the city. A few hours into the watch, something caught Naruto's eye. The train of refugees had come from a nearby village for some reason or another. But to Naruto, there was something off about them. Their eyes were glazed and they shuffled like the Walking Dead. But more than that, Naruto could sense something, like their emotions were somehow being suppressed or controlled. But under the blanket of static, Naruto could feel one thing. They were terrified. "You noticed it too," Owl whispered. "Yeah, something is off about them," Naruto murmured. He placed his hand on his hilt. Then Naruto spotted something else weird. Inside the crowd, there was a man, but unlike the rest of them, he wasn't acting like the rest of them. Back of the crowd, male, sandy blonde hair, tall, he isn't acting like the rest. "I see him, Jinjutsu." Naruto gripped his wakizashi with a force that would have hurt like hell if he had been paying attention. Wait, the civilians have explosive tags on their bodies. Owl exhaled sharply. Naruto gritted his teeth. How the hell do you know that? He softly returned, his voice no less conveying his shock at the bold claim. Byakugan, Owl said simply. Naruto turned back to face the man controlling the train. What should we do? He rasped harshly. Owl paused before pressing his palm into his Anbu tattoo and generated a burst of chakra. After a few seconds, he responded. Taicho wants you to take him out, wait for him to get inside the village so that he thinks he's through, then kill him. You'll have the least chance of being suspected due to your age. Is he insane? Why the hell don't we take them out here? Naruto didn't like the plan, and in fact, he hated it. It would be the first time he would have to kill somebody, and many people could end up dead in such high stakes. But he knew Tenzo was right. He was the best one suited for the job, but why inside the village? Owl channeled chakra into his seal again. Captain says they don't have enough time to send for backup out here. If something goes wrong out here, they'll sprint past the guards because they won't be able to catch them all. Fuck this mission. He muttered under his breath. Naruto turned to leave to go back into the town when Owl grabbed his arm. Good luck. He whispered. Naruto stared at him for a few seconds and then nodded and left, intent on finding the perfect place to take his quarry. Naruto understood that as an Anbu, he would have to kill people. Perhaps it would be unsavory, some sort of assassination mission or killing thugs out in the ass end of nowhere. But he never expected his first kill to be in the middle of the village. Naruto was sitting on a bench in a park, bent over with his hands clasped. He sat there waiting. Clones had been set up among the rooftops to see where the target was. As soon as one dispelled, their memories would come and Naruto would be ready to execute the plan the clone had created. It wasn't so much the idea of killing somebody that terrified him. It was the fact that so much was at stake if Naruto didn't kill him. If I don't do this, many people will die today. He thought frantically. Suddenly he felt his Anbu tattoo give a slight burst of chakra. Kitsune, are you in position? Tenzo's voice rang out in his head. Yes, Taicho, I'm just waiting for the moment to strike. Are you ready to do this? I can always have another. Taicho, with all due respect, you asked me to back you guys up. Consider this being my first time doing so, oh and fuck this mission. Alright, in that case, don't hesitate. Tenzo sounded somewhat reluctant. I won't. I promise, Kitsune out. With that, Naruto ended the connection. Just then, a flurry of memories hit Naruto. He stiffened, seeing the plan that his clone had come up with. Naruto took a deep breath and tried to relax his shoulders. Alright, let's do this. He muttered harshly. With that, he was gone with a shunshin. His disguise wasn't much. His henge wasn't too dissimilar from his everyday looks. Naruto's spiky hair had become a dull brown, his whiskers were hidden, and his eyes were uncovered and had turned standard green color, but other than that, he still looked like Uzumaki Naruto. He could see the refugee train heading straight for the Hokage Tower, their zombie-like shuffling never ceasing as they marched onwards. However, now, the man was in front of the crowd. All the easier for me, I suppose. Naruto thought. He had stashed most of his gear in a trash bin in an alley nearby to be as unassuming as he could. All he had on him currently was the wakizashi that he had hidden in his pants on his backside. On a corner street in front of the crowd was where Naruto stood waiting, tapping his foot incessantly while watching the group without drawing attention to himself. Slowly, second by the second, he watched them as they approached them. The first one passed him, then a second, then a third. Finally, the man controlling the refugee train passed him. Naruto waited a few seconds and then swung in and joined the procession. It was an agonizing slow movement up to the bomber. He couldn't walk too slowly. Otherwise, the bomber would get to his target before Naruto could. At the same time, he couldn't risk moving any faster than a shuffle so as not to arouse suspicion. With the patience of a predator stalking its prey, Naruto crept through the crowd, slowly weaving in between the hostages, and after a few minutes found himself staring at the back of his target. The upper spine. Naruto thought. That's where I'll strike him. Quick as a flash, Naruto drew his blade and, with a silent hiss, thrust his sword into the man's back and lodged it between his vertebrae, killing him instantly. Without even a sigh, the man dropped to the ground, dead. Naruto sighed with relief, glad that the mission was over. Or at least that's what was supposed to be the case. As soon as it registered to the refugees what had happened, they started screaming. One sprinted towards the Hokage's office while roaring. Long live the daimyo. Gritting his teeth, Naruto ran after him and he created 4 other clones to deal with the rest. Naruto quickly caught up to him despite his size. With a grunt, Naruto lunged and buried his blade deep in the man's kidney, who moaned in pain and dropped to the ground. Naruto turned around to see what was happening. It wasn't a pretty sight. His clones were fighting with a few of the other refugees. Among them, it seemed that some had tried pulling off the tags on them, but it seemed to be to no avail. "What the hell is going on?" Naruto exclaimed in horror. Suddenly the rest of his team appeared and cut down the rest of the combatants, all for one who had taken a child hostage. "Lay down your weapons." The lady screeched frantically as she held a knife to the boy's throat. "Or the child dies." Nico, however, appeared behind her and skewered her through the neck with her sword. Naruto suddenly fell on his behind as his mind finally caught up with his body. "What the hell was that?" he panted. "That," Tenzo said, turning to Naruto, "was your first mission done." "Clever bastards," Nico grunted while wiping her sword, "hid some of their own in with the hostages in case something went wrong." "Damn, I guess what they say about first missions is true," Tenzo muttered, inspecting the tag of the woman that Nico had killed. He turned to Naruto. "Sorry, that was your intro into the Anbu. Usually, stuff like that doesn't happen until your first infiltration mission." He awkwardly laughed. It's alright I guess," Naruto replied, wincing at his stutter. Tenzo stood up, switching back into business mode. "We need to cordon off the area." He could have had a deadman switch on him. "Owl, you're in charge of the bomber's corpse. Kitsune, use clones to gather up all the bodies and people into one area in case they go off." He turned to the rest of his team and the two supporting teams that they had called for. "The rest of you need to escort the civilians out of here and notify the higher-ups. Am I clear?" "Hi Taicho." They all shouted and went about their messy cleanup. "I wonder how much of the village's coffers I would have to empty for the rest of the world to give us some damn peace and quiet for more than a few months," Hiruzen grumbled under his breath. He surveyed the street that the Anbu had cordoned off. Inside he could see the bodies of the terrorists still laying in the street, tags long defused. Tenzo appeared at his side, kneeling at the Hokage's feet. "Report." Hiruzen grunted. "Okage-sama, the terrorists entered the village at roughly 1500 hours. Kitsune killed what was assumed to be the bomber at the time. It appeared as if he was casting a genjutsu over the entire group. But he wasn't, and he had other men mixed in with those who had been put under a genjutsu." Hiruzen guessed. "Yes, Hokage-sama, they all had explosive tags on them, but some were willing suicide bombers." The old man turned back to the grisly but familiar scene. "You didn't become Hokage without becoming intimately close with death after all." "Motive?" "Currently, we have a few leads. The Intel division thinks that it was possibly another Iwa-sponsored attack. However, our primary suspect is a group called the Royal Pillar. A group whose stated goal is the subjugation of Konoha to the Fire Daimyo." "The Daimyo, How much more do we have on this group?" Hiruzen asked. "Not much, they're prevalent in the Fire Capital, and they seem to have wealthy benefactors along with experienced shinobi and chakra practitioners in their ranks. It is also unknown what this group's origins are. The problems keep piling up, don't they?" Hiruzen growled. "Orochimaru and now possibly the daimyo himself." He turned to Tenzo, "Tell the intelligence division that I want every available spy to head to the Fire Capital. The main priority is finding out anything and everything about this group." "Hi Hokage-sama." And with a flicker, he was gone. A few weeks later. Danzo inspected the children and parents of the prospective shinobi with his lone eye as they filed into the academy grounds. The day was the first day of the new school year, and as such, the academy's headmaster was expected to give a speech to the new and returning students. When he agreed to take the post that Hiruzen had so mercifully given him, Danzo assumed that the task was a glorified retirement that he was being forced into. However, he did not expect how low the standards had fallen even since the Third Shinobi War. The fact both he and Hiruzen had overlooked this major problem within the village troubled him. "What's the point of maintaining the will of fire if no one is there to inherit it?" Danzo mused internally. So for the past few months, he had been hard at work restructuring the academy's curriculum. Of course, he had yet to see if his efforts would pay off in the long run. Danzo was playing a dangerous game, that much he knew. It was a delicate balancing act of trying to make sure that talented civilian-born shinobi made it into the force and making sure that the clans of Konoha were satisfied with the progress that their next generation had been achieving, while also making sure that any who were unfit to be shinobi were rooted out. As such, he probably would be stepping on people's toes for however long he would be headmaster. But for someone like him, it mattered little. After all, Danzo was merciful in his own sadistic way. Would the student rather die on his first mission out of the village, or would he instead be ousted from the program? He shook his head. It was for the best that they left and left quickly. After the dead weight was mostly cut from the academy, they would move quickly into their studies. The basics needed to be drilled into them while they were young. A tree can only grow so big with shallow roots. Danzo remembered how Tobirama-sensei had spent nearly a month with him, beating into him to throw a shuriken properly. Good days, he chuckled. The clear and concise understanding of chakra was the first thing they would focus on without it. After that, the students would be taught general applications for it. Danzo was furious upon learning that they did not teach the students the water walking technique or the tree walking process. Then they would focus on physical fitness and taijutsu until they were at acceptable levels. Then they could concentrate on specializing the individual students. Speaking of which, Danzo had requested a few of his former root members be transferred to be made instructors. Hiruzen had hesitantly granted his wish. But of course, the real first step to fixing the academy was here and now. He took a step forward and clasped his hands behind his back. "Prospective shinobi of Konoha," Danzo called out imperiously. Immediately he gained the attention of most of the crowd. He tapped his cane hard on the concrete of the sidewalk. "Today, you stand in front of the Konoha Shinobi Academy. Among you, I see much promise for the future of this village. However, I must first ask you a question. What is a shinobi?" The crowd went silent, stunned by his imposing aura. Finally, a hand shot up. "Are they people who learn how to use chakra?" a boy asked. "An educated guess, but nonetheless incorrect," Danzo replied. The Hyuga heiress's hand was timidly raised in the air. To gain honor for our family?" "No," he flatly replied, much to her dismay. Another hand shot up, this time from a pink-haired girl. "Is it to serve the village?" "A bit closer," Danzo conceded. "But I shall give you the whole truth. Hear me now. The way of the shinobi is resolute acceptance of death. As a shinobi, you will be asked to fight, bleed, exhaust yourselves and even die." At the crowd's shocked silence, he carried on. "Some among you perhaps might be questioning why I am being so harsh on children your age. I am harsh because the world will be harsher. What I have described for you is the reality of the shinobi. It is a constant sacrifice of everything and anything mundane and trivial for the will of fire. This self-perfection in the face of death will be all you know from the time you put on the hit of Konoha to the time you take your last breath, which, for some of you, may only be a few years from now." Again the crowd was wholly stunned into silence. Some of the children were even crying as their parents attempted to comfort them. "Nevertheless," Danzo continued, "any who do not wish to travel this path may leave. There is no shame in it. We all have our purpose to play in life, and if the way of the shinobi is not yours, then so be it." Slowly some of the parents pulled their children away from the academy, some of the orphans who had come left by themselves, though the vast majority of the orphans stayed. Danzo was not surprised by this. Generally, they had nowhere to go except to the academy. Over the course of roughly 15 minutes, the academy grounds thinned considerably to the point that less than half of the prospective students remained standing nervously in front of the grizzled warhawk. "Are there any more who wish to leave?" Danzo called. The children stood their ground as the parents of those who were there, primarily clansmen. "To those of you who stayed, I congratulate you and I welcome you to my academy. I promise to never give up on making you shinobi, even if you yourselves have given up." Chapter 7. The days had gone by fast, faster than the old hawk had felt in a long time. He was used to waiting years, decades, for his plans to unfold. Watching as piece by piece, his machinations all fell into place. However, seeing the growth of the students in the academy in just a year made him understand why youth tends to create impatience. The rate at which many of them had excelled through their studies or had dropped out had surprised even him. He smirked to himself. "Hiruzen, you old monkey, you've outdone yourself this time." All these thoughts ran through his mind as he supervised the first class as they sparred in the courtyard, watching them keenly from the headmaster's office. Danzo had come into his own at the academy. At first, he had taken his punishment as he always had, stoically and professionally, as a true shinobi should. However, as the months rolled by and as much as he would deny it vehemently, his new posting had grown on him. Of course, there was much work that had to be done and much work still to be done, but with the rate things were progressing, Danzo was more than pleased with the academy. "Begin," the instructor called, breaking his train of thought. Danzo's eyes focused on the two children inside the ring. Both were females, one the Hyuga heiress and the other an unknown pink-haired girl. The pink-haired one rushed the heiress, yelling a war cry with her fist raised above her head. "Bold," Danzo muttered under his breath, expecting the Hyuga heiress to take her out in one hit, regardless of how much fire her opponent had. However, that is not what happened. Instead, the heiress flinched and, at the last moment, parried the overhead strike that the pink-haired girl had aimed at her head. The parry pushed her off balance and made her stumble, which the heiress should have used as an opportunity to end the spar. But yet again, she defied all expectations of a shinobi and instead used her opponent's pause to move to the other side of the ring. Like a bull, the pink-haired girl was incensed at the dodge and did the same thing she had done before. This time the Hyuga, instead of parrying, moved to the very edge, seemingly terrified of the charging girl. Danzo watched the girls with confusion. Had the Hyugas neglected their heiress's training? Or was she naturally timid? Waiting once again for the last second, the heiress sidestepped her opponent and pushed the pink-haired girl out of the ring with a mighty shove. And so the mare shows her hooves. Danzo mused. Raw. The instructor announced. The headmaster's brow furrowed again in confusion. Then he saw that the heiresses, in her sidestep, had planted a foot outside of the ring. Make the sign of peace. The pair of students moved to the middle of the ring again, bowed to each other, and shakily raised their right hands in a sign of peace. What a strange spar. Danzo exclaimed in the quietness of his office, the group in the courtyard not hearing him in the slightest. The heiress's fighting was sloppy and timidity radiated from her. But she showed apparent potential. So why was her cousin, a branch member no less, doing so much better than her? He turned his back to the window and went for the door. The breeze in the office felt good, but Danzo thought it felt much better to be outside than indoors, regardless of his previous headquarters, a quarter of a mile deep underground. Again a pair of children were sparring as Danzo walked outside, but he was more interested in the girl slowly sitting on a tree swing, watching the crowd of students and the fight. He took a moment to inspect the heiress truly. Her hair was cut short, a noblewoman's sign of disgrace, an automatic red flag for Danzo. While maintaining the Hyuga's glassy and somewhat distant appearance, her eyes seemed dead compared to the average Hyuga. Her posture was closed and shy, showing apparent stress and exhaustion. If Danzo were any less of a hardened shinobi, he would have been saddened by her appearance, but he was accustomed to this sort of thing. He had been all his life. What was one more child broken by war after all? But as those tired and timid eyes looked up at him, he couldn't help but feel a twinge in his heart as she stared at him for a moment, terrified at being stared down by her headmaster. After a moment of eye contact, her head ducked down swiftly, eyes meeting the dirt below her as she swung silently. His head turned to look back at the crowd, watching the next fight, but only half paying attention as he felt her fear emanating from her tiny frame. Damn it. One of the boys grunted, pulling Danzo's attention. Take that. He flung a kunai at his opponent with a clumsy swing, which went wide and flew toward the swinging girl. Within a blink of an eye, Danzo drew a kunai of his own and had thrown it in the trajectory of the offending weapon. It struck true, and the kunai was thrown off its course. However, in the process, Danzo's kunai had sheared off a piece of steel from it. The shrapnel continued and gave the heiress a shallow cut on the cheek, whose reflexes being too slow, had not realized what had happened until it was too late. Slowly she put a hand to her bleeding and pulled it back, looking at the blood on her hand. Her eyes sprang tears, and she silently started to cry on the swing, her hiccuping being heard by the now silent courtyard. Let that be a lesson to you. Danzo's voice boomed out, turning the students' attention to him. That in combat, you must be mindful of your opponents and your comrades. His eyes glared at the student who had thrown the kunai. If I had not been there, your classmate could have been seriously wounded, which could cause both their death and yours in the field. Do you understand me? He growled at the student, an Inuzuka member. He gulped. Why yes sir. He hastily said. And no, it's okay, headmaster, he didn't mean it. The heiress finally spoke. A stutter. He wondered silently as he turned to her face upturned to see him and the Inuzuka. It's just a small C-cut headmaster. She said through her tears. Besides, I wouldn't be much use on a battlefield, so that it would be okay for me to she trailed off. Danzo stared at her once again, looking into her eyes. Slowly, he walked over to her, pulled out a handkerchief and pressed it against her open wound. She jumped at the sudden touch. What is your name, girl? He asked. She stared at him in shock before returning, Hinata, headmaster. Hinata-sama, why do you consider yourself a liability? Because she stopped to collect herself, blinking slowly and trying to concentrate, obviously having difficulty. Because my father said that I was useless, she whispered, shame apparent in her shaking voice. Danzo stared at her for another second, an unreadable expression covering his face. Then he stood up and looked back over at the students who, at this point, were staring at both him and Hinata. All of you would be useless in a battle. Very few 9-year-olds would be of any merit in a fight. Perhaps your father is being unrealistic. He said, still staring at the students who looked away in embarrassment at his comment. Hinata looked up at him, eyes wide with horror at the notion that anyone would disagree with her father. But Niji-Nisan would die as soon as he was in combat. A one-on-one duel is one thing. Actual warfare is something completely different. Danzo interrupted her. It matters little how skilled he is in a duel. Niji would still die. Her head dipped, seemingly ashamed that she had disagreed with her superior. Yes, headmaster. She whispered. The good news is that is exactly why you are here, to become proficient at warfare, Danzo responded. He stood up, handkerchief in hand. Go to the nurse's office and get that wound taken care of. She nodded. Yes, headmaster. And quickly into the building. Danzo watched her go, and after disappearing inside, he stared down at the handkerchief in his hand. Perhaps. Anemic. Hiruzen asked skeptically, staring at Danzo from across his desk. Danzo nodded. I had her blood checked by the nurses. She has a low red blood cell count, possibly why she has performed poorly in the past. Hiruzen rubbed his temples. So you decided, without any precedent or permission, to take a sample of an heiress of one of the most important clans in Konoha. Danzo raised an eyebrow. I am the headmaster of the academy. Is it not my responsibility to care for the children placed in my care? Hiruzen rolled his eyes. I'm surprised you could say that with a straight face. He grumbled. Danzo nearly did smirk at that. So why did you come to me about this then? Normally, I would handle this myself. However, regarding clan heirs and such, it requires the Hokage to approve the medication. What do you want to put her on? Iron supplements, preferably of Akimichi make. Hiruzen looked sharply at him. Is it truly that bad? That bad, but treatable. The nurses think it is a diet deficiency. Well, the Hyuga with that long narrow stick up their ass will never change their main house diets, much less if for one they deem a disappointment. I should also mention that her poor performance is partially due to psychological issues. I ran a background check legal, Danzo stressed, seeing Hiruzen's partial glare. Along with the kidnapping incident, her mother died in childbirth of their second daughter. Her father seems to blame much of it on her, if I may guess. Danzo explained. Why would you say that? And how badly do you think it is? Hinata-sama told me that her father said she was useless and expressed the sentiment that it would be better if she were to die to be less of a burden. Danzo had touched a nerve, and he knew it. Hiruzen always had a soft spot for children, which is why he assumed that he fought against making the Jinchuriki a weapon so vehemently, apart from his heritage. He could feel the pressure in the room rise as Hiruzen took in his words. Fine, I permit you to prescribe iron pills to her. Try to keep the dosage low. It can be especially toxic for children if overdosed. He finally ground out. What are these? Hinata asked, big eyes looking curiously at Danzo. Iron supplements. He responded, the nurses checked your blood. It seems you lack red blood cells in your body. Perhaps that is why your performance is so bad. Hinata looked down, slightly humiliated by her headmaster's words. With all due respect, sir, my failure is due to a lack of talent. Danzo was silent for a moment and then spoke, failure is a mode of being, not a fixed destiny. She cocked her head. What do you mean, headmaster? Perhaps you are a failure now, but you don't have to be in a week, a month, 6 months, a year. He replied, for you to succeed, you must fail. Otherwise, how will you know what you have done wrong? At this point, Hinata's eyes were as wide as saucers, moon-pale eyes staring up at him with hope. Danzo continued. Failure is the greatest teacher, the most painful, and she may break you, but she will always be the most excellent teacher if you are willing to listen to her. That's so, do you think there's hope for me, sir? Breathlessly she questioned, hesitant and new hope blooming on her face. As I said a few days ago, Hinata-sama, if there truly were no hope for you, I would have sent you away from the academy. The pair were silent for a moment before Danzo cleared his throat. Are there any days which you can stay for longer after school? He asked her. Friday. She stuttered out. I am offering you tutoring sessions that you would seem to require. Do you accept it? She sat stunned in front of him, mouth slightly ajar. She collected herself. Why yes, headmaster. She nearly shouted. For the first time, Danzo allowed himself to crack a small smile at her sudden enthusiasm. Very well then, will from the end of school to 1830 hours work for you? Yes, headmaster. She repeated, this time with more confidence. Very well then. He tapped his cane against the hardwood floor. You are dismissed. You may return to your class, Hinata-sama. Man, this really sucks. Naruto thought. He had heard about first missions being cursed, but at least cursed is better than boring. Fire country rarely had severe rainstorms, or they happened mainly near the coast more than anywhere else. But the god seemed somewhat of a bad mood for the last few days, for it had been pouring non-stop for nearly half a week. Of course, such things would never stop the Anbu from carrying out their duties, but it sure made it a whole hell of a lot more annoying. Silently Naruto sighed, making sure his posture never changed as he sat perched on a tree. In another tree, Anko slightly tilted her head. He had been noticed. The water dripped down the hood of his jacket as he rolled his eyes. Anko and he had started playing a game on sentry duty. Whoever could stay still the longest without any movement won. As it stood, Anko had just won the third round of this patrol. Though she stayed still as stone in her position, Naruto could almost feel her amusement and triumph. Yeah, whatever. Laugh it up, Anko, he said through the Anbu seal on his arm. Despite emotion not being able to be communicated through the seals, Naruto could hear her cackle in his mind's eye. Sucks to suck, kid, she shot back. Both of you shut up. Tenzo blessedly interrupted her victory speech. She shot him a rude gesture, but nevertheless knew when Tenzo was being serious and kept quiet after that. Naruto returned to his job, watching the tree line as the other half of the squad returned from surveying the surrounding area. He suppressed a shiver, flooded his body with chakra to keep himself warm, and stared straight ahead. He was intent on not showing any weakness for the rest of the mission. After about another hour, the other half, Uago and Shiryu, returned to them. "All clear," Uago said. Naruto's shoulders sagged in apparent relief. He was glad to get out of the rain and put on some warm, dry clothes after being out in the storm for more than a few hours now. All had been routine for the past year for him. Apart from the first mission, Naruto had had no combat or extreme trials since then. He felt slightly guilty because he knew some in his team, like Uago and Anko, were itching for a more dangerous mission. He sighed when he felt a clone dispel. Ichiraku's was close because of the storm. Shrugging, he turned the keys to his door and deactivated his security seal. It was still raining hard as the droplets pounded against the windows of his apartment. He put on another set of clothes and flopped down on his couch. Distinctly he wondered about what Kakashi-sensei was doing. Naruto knew he was on a solo mission out of the village, but anything other than that was above his pay grade. Yawning, he grabbed a scroll from his shelf about some basic elemental theory and sat back down on his couch, listening to the rain, and waited for the kettle on the stove to boil. The mist was thick near the port of Akanasakana. Kakashi could barely peer 20 feet in front of him as he walked down one of the roads of the city. Fishmongers and other tradesmen clamored, attempting to get the attention of passers-by. Kakashi paid them no mind as he waltzed into a local tavern. "Want a drink?" the bartender called to him. "Depends," Kakashi drawled. "Do any of them have fish oil in them?" The bartender frowned. "We do, but only in shots." "I'll have one in a pint then," Kakashi returned. "I'll see if we have any in that size." The bartender went into the back and left Kakashi to wait in the bar proper. It was late in the day, but it was evident that it was yet to become filled with its usuals. The only people at the bar at the moment were drunkards. Or spies. Kakashi thought just before the bartender returned. "We do have some in that size. Would you mind coming back with me to inspect them?" "I would be happy to," Kakashi said as he stepped behind the bar. The barman gestured to the doorframe and walked into the bar's back room. Kakashi followed. Underneath a dimly lit room, a tall, relatively broad, and fat-in-the-belly man sat with long, red spiky hair. He was eyeing Kakashi with a decidedly pointed look. After a moment's pause, the red-haired man turned his chair to face him. "Jiraiya said someone would be coming." He gave after a second pause, never breaking his gaze from Kakashi. "Well," Kakashi said. "Here I am." "So you are." The man grunted. "So what can the famed copycat ninja from Konoha need from a simple businessman like me?" Kakashi narrowed his eyes at the mention of his nickname, but nevertheless continued. "I've heard through a little bird that there are some snakes in the area. I thought I might take care of them as I passed by." "Ho ho, is that so?" The man quirked his eyebrow, apparently catching on. "Well, they have been causing trouble with some of my brothers, so I suppose I wouldn't mind." "Know where to find any of their dens?" Kakashi asked. "Akanashi," the now-named man replied. "Uzumaki Akanashi." He shifted his weight and placed his elbow on the table, leaning on it. "It's my understanding that there's some on the island just a few miles out. As for where their dens are," Akanashi shrugged. "Not sure, but I'm certain a man of your talents could trace them back to their dens." "I see," Kakashi responded. "Is this island where your brothers are?" Akanashi narrowed his eyes. "Yes, it is." After a brief silence. "Oh, and one other thing," he added. "Another one has been doing a little snake hunting in the area, though my brothers and I have paid for it." Kakashi became interested. "Oh?" Akanashi nodded his head. "Yup, a demon that a snowflake follows, be careful, he might be a little possessive of his prey. I'd try not to get in his way." The scarecrow didn't know what to make of that just yet. But once he had more information, he would understand. Kakashi shrugged. "Thank you for the heads up." Akanashi dipped his head in acknowledgement. "Of course, these snakes have been an issue for us for a few years now. We'll be thankful for any help to get rid of them." Kakashi nodded. "If there's nothing else, I believe that is all," Akanashi said. "I will take my leave then." Kakashi returned. He bowed slightly to the boss in respect and left. Luckily for Kakashi, a fishing boat transporting cargo to Uchiha was pulling out in an hour. Kakashi just had to pay a toll to get over. "It's damn foggy today, but it's a sure shot to Uchiha," the boat skipper told Kakashi. "Shouldn't take us more than an hour to get over there." "Thank you," Kakashi responded. "Though don't know why you'd want to go over there. Ain't much left other than those fireheads, and they'll chuck you in the sea if they find you snooping around." The fog cleared up around halfway through their voyage, splitting the air and giving the ship's crew a beautiful sky and perfect visibility. "We'll be needing it when we come up on Uchiha," the skipper called to Kakashi. "Why's that?" "Ain't called the land of whirlpools for nothing," the skipper cackled before spitting overboard. "Don't you worry, though. We've been through these whirlpools 1,000 times over." Kakashi didn't respond. A few minutes later, the skipper called out to Kakashi again. "Land ho. There she is." He turned to where the skipper was pointing and saw the island. Even from a distance, it looked desolate. "It's little more than a rock pounded by the waves," the skipper said. "Course, there's treasures abound on that rock, but you'd have to get past both the fireheads and their traps." "Why do they stay there?" Kakashi asked, faking the tourist. The skipper shrugged. "Who knows? There was a big war a while back, and I think the Land of Water and Land of Lighting teamed up to smash 'em. Heard the Land o' Stone joined too, but I doubt it. They like their feet on solid ground." The skipper shrugged again. "Course no one blames them, hell I respect 'em for it. They stick to that island like barnacles on a ship. They'd rather die than let others take that rock from 'em." I see," Kakashi said, watching the island. Of course, he knew all of that. The fall of Uchiha had been one of the biggest disgraces to Konoha. Their failure to help the island village had caused many of their allies to lose faith in them. After all, if they couldn't help what was practically their sister village, then why would they help anyone else? Of course, Konoha had its hands tied up on multiple fronts, and the daimyo had forbidden them from going to their aid because of a scandal between the Lord's son and the Uzumaki clan. Still, it was not their brightest day. Kakashi silently prayed for the Uzumaki, who fell needlessly because Konoha could not come to their aid. However, something caught Kakashi's eye. A glint from the horizon. Kakashi swore and barely had time before. Thunk. 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 Kakashi had ducked under 3 shuriken, which had firmly lodged themselves into the mast behind. He stood up and sprinted to the side of the boat, intent on finding out who had thrown them. 3 men in masks stood on the water, kunai in their hands as they stared back at Kakashi. 2 sprinted forward as soon as Kakashi saw the trio and ran up the ship's side, while the last one started performing hand signs. Kakashi threw a pair of shuriken at the one performing the ninjutsu. The boatswain knocked off his aim slightly as the ninja dodged it, the blade sinking harmlessly to the bottom of the sea. However, it stopped him for a brief second. He then hopped over the side and used chakra to stick himself to the side of the boat. One of the attackers let out a war cry and brought down their kunai in an overhead thrust over Kakashi's head. He grabbed the attacker's wrist and thrust a kunai deep into his stomach. The other ninja appeared behind Kakashi, intent on a surprise attack. With effortless ease, Kakashi pivoted and used his first attacker's body to block the ninja's ambush. His enemy's eyes widened as he saw that his kunai suddenly had embedded itself in his comrade's body. Kakashi used his attacker's surprise to pull out another kunai and slit his jugular open. Clasping his neck and letting out a gurgle, the ninja's chakra grip on the ship slipped and he fell off the side, his floating body dying, the waters red with his blood. Kakashi let go of his human shield, which dropped like a stone and hit the water with a crash before coming up and floating with his comrade. The final one, who had before been distracted by Kakashi's shuriken, finally let off his jutsu. A fireball erupted from his mouth and sped towards the sails of the boat. Kakashi's eyes widened as he ran through the seals to create a water bullet, but it was too late. The sailors screamed and roared as they saw their boat sails burst into flames. In 10 seconds, the deck had become utter chaos. The skipper was shouting out orders to his men, trying his best to keep the crew from fully panicking. "Roll them up. Without those sails, we'll be dead in the water," the skipper called to his sailors. They tried to hoist them up, but the ropes had caught fire too, snapping them. Suddenly Kakashi felt the boat move under his feet. They were moving towards a whirlpool, about 50 feet and closing fast. "Brace for impact," the skipper said as they drew nearer and nearer to the whirlpool when all of a sudden, the boat came to a complete halt, causing many of the men to fall over. Kakashi sprinted to the side once more to see an Uzumaki standing upon the water with his hands outstretched, straining against the boat. With a roar, the Uzumaki gave a mighty shove and the ship lurched lazily towards the shore. The ship, carried by the waves of the sea, resisted the pull back into the whirlpool and instead headed straight for the island. With a mighty crash, the flaming boat beached itself onto a sandy outcrop of the island, making the crew safe and sound, as well as their cargo. Kakashi breathed a sigh of relief and stood up straight, surveying the deck. Behind him, the captain ordered. "Go below and fetch the water. We need to put out those fires." Kakashi, however, was already on it. Suiton. Water wave. With the appropriate seals, Kakashi blew a wave of water onto the masts and sails, putting the flames out and drizzling the deck in water. In just a few seconds, most of the fire was gone. The last few fires were being stomped out of existence by the crew as Kakashi went to look over the side. The man from earlier was standing on the beach simply looking at Kakashi. He called up to him. "Akanashi said you would be coming." "Well, here I am." Kakashi returned, mimicking his recent greetings. The man laughed and called out again. "We've paid well for the cargo on that ship, help me get it out and then we'll talk about those troublesome snakes." Kakashi turned back to the crew still putting out the rest of the fires. I think it'll be a moment before we can unload your precious cargo," he said. And it did take them quite a while. After all of the last fires were finally put out, the skipper wanted a full status report of the ship. "Well, it ain't good," he grumbled. "The main sails burned to cinders and the other two are badly damaged. We'll have to stay on the island a while to patch up the sails." Finally, the gangplanks were lowered and the cargo came down on the beach. The man whistled and two more of his kinsmen appeared on the ridge and walked down, helping the men with their load. While helping, Kakashi finally looked at the man who had saved the ship back on the sea. He was broad-chested and had thick forearms that betrayed an immense power in his body. Long red hair was tied up in a low ponytail, and he wore a pair of drab gray harem pants and a ratty brown shirt that had been pulled back and sewn at the elbows to not get in the way at work. Over all that, he was wearing a flak jacket that had seen too much use. In fact, the zipper had been ripped off long ago and was currently being fastened by what appeared to be fishbone buttons. All in all, he was a roguish-looking fellow who looked more perhaps like a pirate than a shinobi, if not for the few ninjutsu tattoos on his forearms. "Alright, let's get these home," he called his family members. They nodded in affirmation and, with a quick word and signs, created a few cage bunchen each, who promptly loaded up their cargo and trotted off the beach to some unknown place to Kakashi. The stranger turned to Kakashi. "Ah, where are my manners? I am Takahata," he said in a quiet neutral voice and extended his hand to Kakashi, who took it. "I'm Kakashi." Wincing at Takahata's grip. "Geez, he's got a grip like a gorilla," he silently moaned. "Yes, Akanashi said you would be coming," Takahata repeated, keeping his neutral tone. "The famed shinobi from Konoha." Kakashi could not help but hear the slightly bitter tone Takahata had used for his home village. Internally he sighed but couldn't blame the man. "Yes, well, I've been tasked to perform reconnaissance in the area because of a particular snake that Akanashi mentioned." Takahata's eyes narrowed but nodded. "I see. You are welcome to stay as long as needed in the area. My family will see to it." Kakashi bowed his head in thanks. "Many blessings upon you and your descendants," he said, remembering the old benediction Kushina had told him about all those years ago. Takahata seemed taken aback but quickly regained his composure. "And also with yours," he returned before motioning with his right hand. "Come, we have a long way to go and these men need shelter for the night." So with uncertainty in his soul, Kakashi followed Takahata up the beach. What if Naruto has special eyes in Konoha? And thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel and leave a like if you guys need the next part, comment down, and thanks for watching the video and see you guys in the next video.